Welcome, everybody, and to today's Insurance Untangled Live. Stay, shift, or break free from PPOs. Before we dive in, I'd like to do a quick introduction of myself. I'm Lila Stone. I'm your host and moderator today. I work for Equa. I help dental practices with their strategy, marketing operations, and understanding their marketing, how to get there, and set up that plan to drop PPOs. So I'm thrilled to guide you through today's powerhouse lineup. I'm glad you've joined us today. You're making a great decision to invest your time in today in your practice's future. Today's session runs from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and you're going to earn 3 hours of CE credit. To get your credit, you're going to need to stay until the end and fill out the form. Then you can expect your credit in about 2 weeks' time. Okay, here's our agenda for today. As you can see, we have a jam-packed event. You're going to be hearing from lots of experts, so be sure to take notes, ask questions, use that Q&A button, or put them in chat, and stick through to the end to get those credits. Let's untangle the confusion, get clear on your options, and give you the tools to make a confident, strategic decisions about your insurance participation. Let me start with our first lineup. Just give me 1 second. Let me get that right slide up. Okay, here we go. And I will start sharing my screen. Okay, let's hear from our insurance admin panel. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to go ahead and do their own intros. Tesna, you're up.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tessana Bullock, and I don't have very good lighting in here today, sorry. So I've been in the industry since 2008, a long time, but not as long as some others. And my passion is truly teaching offices how to take the power back from insurance companies, instead of just being at the mercy of the insurance companies and knowing those laws and rights that protect them in a way that they can do that legally. And then I dally in a range of support for offices as far as admin training, staff implementation, processes implementation, fee negotiations, you name it. I love to help with it, but it's all backed by my core passion of taking the power back.
Okay, Angela, your turn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angela Holland. I love the dental industry, and I found my passion working with insurance companies and getting practices so that the PPOs work for them and not the other way around. And in 2018, I started a dental RCM company. We had an amazing team of insurance specialists across the country, and I sold that to a NASDAQ corporation in 2023. We are back and stronger than ever, and we are serving practices with credentialing strategically with PPOs, as well as negotiations and network optimization, increasing revenue by 28% on average. We are taking the industry by storm for sure.
All right, so that being said, Tesna, you're up first. When it comes to insurance, what does a good breakdown look like in the office?
Yes, a breakdown form. So I get asked about this a lot, and every office just makeshifts their own breakdown forms, and that's totally fine. But what are we missing? And I have discrepancies sometimes, I have to tell you, between what the doctor wants on the form and what the staff wants on the form. And it can be sometimes the doctor wants less and the staff wants more, or vice versa. But really what we need to dial in are what are the procedures that you are doing on a day-to-day, even the procedures that you sometimes do but don't always do, right? All of those procedure codes need to be on the breakdown in order for you to have good treatment plans in place and for your treatment plans to be accurate. You need to have that information, and you want to have it ahead of time, all at once. When you call that insurance or go to that website, get everything at once for that patient. And maybe I'll say for that employer group, because it's best to organize those by employer groups. But you're going to have all that information at once, because it may not just be that one family or that one person using those benefits. It could be anybody else that's with that employer group. So you really want to take the time to be detailed in that initial breakdown form gathering, so that it'll speed up your time and your process in the future, and you'll be better organized. So aside from the procedure codes, the only other thing I'd recommend is making sure you're asking about exclusions, limitations, and a lot of websites have on, insurance companies have on their websites a PDF that you can open up that will tell you the processing policies. It's really important to be informed on those processing policies so that, again, they say bone grafts are covered, but not if done on the same day as an extraction. SRP is covered, but it has to be a minimum of 4 millimeter pockets, right? Those details we need to know, because if you're upset about a denial and you're wondering if you can fight it, you have to first ask yourself, did they process it according to the contract guidelines? And if they did, then they're not at fault. You weren't properly informed. So make sure you have all that information dialed in and detailed into your breakdown form and in your software so that you can give correct and accurate estimates.
Okay, and one thing I like to do on these panels is kind of do roundtable. If anybody has anything they want to jump in and add, I always open it up, see if anybody has anything they want to contribute. So if so, feel free. Otherwise, I will go to Angela. Angela, is fee-for-service the best option? Let's talk options.
Yeah, options. I think that it is absolutely an option for practices, and that there are so many pieces when deciding whether to be a PPO-driven practice, HMO-driven practice, Medicaid, Medicare, or fee-for-service. You have to take into account the practice location, the practice goals, the doctor's goals, what kind of work schedule they're looking to live, what kind of everything. You have to take the full picture into account. When you purchase a practice going from a PPO operation, which is what I specialize in, so that's kind of what I refer to as the PPO operation, to then turning it into a fee-for-service practice, that takes a long time when done strategically and in a way that won't impact the doctor in a way that they can't function. So to keep that cash flow up, I think fee-for-service is an option, but the reality is in 2024, the ADA said that only, I think it was 4 to 6% of practices are true fee-for-service practices. So if you're part of the majority of dental practices, full fee-for-service is probably not the best option. But again, it's so practice specific, doctor specific.
Okay, let's dive in a little bit deeper on that. That definition, how is the ADA defining those 4 to 6%?
So I don't know the details of the study, but what I understood from it was full fee for service. So that means that they do not bill the insurance on behalf of the patient as a courtesy. That means a true fee for service cash pay office. If the patient is operating with insurance benefits, they would have to bill insurance benefits on their own.
Okay. So rather than having an insurance coordinator that helps a patient, even though they get full fees, they're not calling them fee for service because there's insurance help from within the office.
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to drill down on that and get some clarification.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. All right. Tessna, was there anything you wanted to jump in on that?
No, I think she nailed it.
All right, so let's go ahead, Tessna. Using website is complicated and calling to get the benefits takes so long. What is the fastest way to get patients benefits?
Yes, another question I get a lot on this. The website logins are complicated. The passwords are changing all the time, and I feel like offices are still not really sure even how to properly read the websites. So getting on the websites, making sure you're familiar with them. And sometimes if you're on a call to get a breakdown of benefits, ask the representative to help you understand their website and what means what on there, because they all use their different wording and they all have things in different places. Navigating and learning how to navigate those websites is going to be the best thing for you. But there's another secret that I use in our insurance verification company, and these are what I call my global notes. Insurance companies, and I've mentioned in the past, if anybody's been listening to any of those old previous talks, there's a huge disconnect between insurance companies and offices. Insurance companies assume that the offices know about their global rules. And so you're like, why can't I find it on the website? I have to call, and it's a 2-hour call. They're assuming you already know and keep track of their global rules. This means some insurance companies, coordination of benefits could be standard for the whole company, regardless of what plan. But offices are calling in because it's not listed on the website. And they're like, well, don't you know, it's standard for all of our plans. Missing tooth clause could be standard across all plans, the whole company, right? So certain things are globally assigned to an insurance company, and making yourself familiar with that information is going to save you a lot of time so that you can use the websites in conjunction with your notes of what does this company globally do to save you some time in there. But other than that, there's just not a faster way right now. There's a lot of AI stuff coming out. That would take a whole nother topic to get into. And I love that stuff. And someday it'll be fine-tuned enough. But right now it's not reliable enough. So the websites and calling is the best way, but you can fine-tune it and speed up your process by understanding the websites and knowing about those global rules.
Okay, where can they find the global rules?
Yes. So again, sometimes it's in the processing policies and that PDF that I was mentioning before. But when you call in the insurance company to get that information, just ask them, is there a missing tooth clause? And then they say yes. And you say, is that a global rule across the whole company, or is that just for this patient? And they will tell you, yep, that's a global rule, or it's per patient. If you have a rep that you're talking to that is not you can tell, I don't know how to say it nicely, not very knowledgeable. If you have a newer rep that's not very knowledgeable about the plans, that's not your person to pick the brain about. If you get on with a rep who's been there a long time, who's very knowledgeable of their plans and services that they offer, that's the person that you want to start picking at to ask, is this a global rule or not? Do I have to call every time for this, or is this something you expect that I should know?
Okay, wonderful. Angela, what error do you see most first-time practice owners make when it comes to credentialing?
Yes, I get that question often. The biggest mistake that I see is that they don't negotiate fees from the beginning. That's kind of like a blanketed statement. So you can negotiate from day one with most PPOs. The other mistakes that we see are as simple as not optimizing the contracting to ensure that you are opted out of backdoor agreements or other payers accessing your lower fee schedules, and also not doing proper demographic research or based on the selling doctor, seeing how they were previously set up with payers to ensure that the purchasing doctor is set up in the most strategic way to make sure that there's minimal patient attrition, but that they're optimizing their revenue. So those are the probably top three that I see.
Okay. Perfect. Let's see. Tesna, one company says I have to do the write-off for a non-covered service while another says I don't. How do I know who's telling the truth and what to do?
Yes, definitely. The complexities of this are overly complicated for no reason. So let's break it down really simple. Making sure that you know your state laws first is going to be where you would start. Are you allowed to charge your full office fee for your state? You can Google this. You just Google, like, can I charge non-covered services in my state? And you can find that out. They have a map. Majority of the states across the country, I would say, are allowed to charge their full office fee for non-covered services. However, people are mixing up non-covered services with denied services. So this is the second thing we need to do to make sure we know when we're allowed to charge that full office fee. It has to be truly a non-covered service, which means there's no appeal that you can do. There's no amount of extra documentation you can send. It's not a covered service. They don't offer it on this plan. That means you're allowed to charge the full office fee. If it is a covered service being denied due to a maximum, a limitation, a frequency, that is still considered a covered service, but being denied due to an exclusion or limitation. And in that situation, this is where it can get confusing. The first thing goes back to the law of like, you have to charge the contracted fee because it's a covered service. But the second part of this is there are some insurance contracts that in the writing of the contract, they allow you to charge your office fee if it maxes out or if it's being denied. So you have to know that contract agreement that you have with that specific insurance company, that if it is covered but being denied, am I then allowed to charge the full office fee? And I feel like that's the bigger question, because they're seeing on these different EOBs and they think it's not covered. But so there's all this confusion around it, right? Again, those bone grafts being denied because it was done the same day as an extraction. Technically, you would have to charge the contracted fee unless that insurance company is giving you the permission to charge your full office fee. Then that agreement between the two of you overrides that state law. So it's really important to make sure you know that you can just call the insurance company and ask them. I rarely recommend asking the insurance for what permissions there are because they only want to tell you what they want to hear. But in this scenario, you really can call and ask them and say, if this patient maxes out, am I allowed to charge my full office fee? Or if this service is denied. Otherwise, you can send out the EOB and it will show on the EOB.
Okay, and given the contracts, I'm assuming it's much easier to call the insurance company, even if you have to wait 2 hours, than to read 200 pages of contract.
Yeah, and I recommend just adding it to your breakdown form. Again, that's one of those things that sneak up that people aren't aware that they should be asking about. Have that on your breakdown form as well, asking if what the rules are around patients that are maxing out or for denied services. Are you allowed to charge your full office fee, or do you have to honor the contracted rate?
How often should, go ahead.
We're also seeing a lot of offices that are unable to decipher whether it's a fully funded plan or a self-funded plan, which can affect the ability to abide by the non-covered services state law. So I agree with Tessina to add that to the benefit breakdown to ask, is this a fully funded insurance plan or is this a self-funded? Because you cannot charge for non-covered services unless your contract says differently, even if you're in a non-covered services state, if it's a self-funded plan. So they have so many layers. Like Tessina said it perfectly. They make it really confusing.
Yes, thank you for adding that, Angela. I appreciate that and agree 100%. Make sure you're asking about that because that does change that.
And speaking of changes, how often do those rules change? So say somebody's called, got an answer in 3 years ago, and now what's the odds if they charge full fees that the insurance company comes back and says, hey, you can't do that. Our rules now say. So how often do those rules change? How often should they go back and double check what they have already found out?
If they have it on their breakdown form and they're regularly asking about this with their new patients, they're going to come across it. But that's not something I see change sporadically without you being notified. So if you get a letter from the insurance company saying this is an addendum to your contract, maybe read through that, right? And make sure that that's something that's not being changed. Otherwise, they're not changing it without notifying you. We hope. If they change it without notifying you, then that's a different discussion.
Okay, perfect.
Re-credentialing process, they'll add in some different tidbits. So that's another place, unless they notify you specifically or when you're re-credentialing, to make sure that you're reviewing the data that's updated.
I have a little mistrust of insurance companies. So. Just a little bit.
Don't we all?
Yes. So I just wanted to make sure that they weren't going to sneak around and change your rules and then, you broke the rules that you didn't know. All right. So let's go ahead and go, Angela. How does UR fee affect fee negotiations? Let's try that one more time. How does UCR affect fee negotiations? There, I got it out.
I knew exactly what you were asking. UCR fee absolutely accepts your negotiation power. So we actually recently were working with a practice who was submitting their contracted fees on all claims, which Tessina is putting her hand on her head because we all would advise UCR fees should be submitted on 100% of claims going out of your practice. But when an office was submitting their contracted fees, it actually limits our ability to negotiate higher fees with the direct contracts because they'll say we have no reports of higher fees being submitted. So absolutely, and UCR fee is absolutely a piece of the puzzle for negotiating power. It is recommended to increase your UCR fees by 3 to 5% annually, and to sit in the 80th to 90th percentile is what kind of the rule of thumb is in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Angela. And sometimes offices aren't aware, or the doctors aren't aware, that they're not submitting to the insurance their office fee. They may have it in the system, and so they assume that they're submitting it. And if they have Dentrix, you have to make sure that your claim form has that F after the date. Right now, it should be 2024 F. And that will make sure that those claims are being submitted with your office fee, not your contracted fee. So I have found, I'm sure you have as well, we come across these offices and they didn't know that they weren't submitting their full office fee. So if you're not 100% positive, go check your software, make sure you're submitting that UCR fee.
Yes.
Okay, so Tesna, it takes a lot of time to manually change each treatment plan. How do you get this done faster?
Yes. So we're trying to figure out treatment plans, and I'm finding offices are manually having to change these treatment plans because they think the software is not capable, and some softwares are better than others and some are less capable. But really, I have found most softwares have some way of a workaround. You have to know your software. You have to set up your defaults ahead of time so that when you, and this goes back to the breakdown and when you're entering the plan benefits, if you set up those defaults and you enter all of that really smooth at the beginning, then your treatment plans don't have to be manually changed as much. They're already in there. I would set some things like a default 0% bone graft, just set it as a default 0% instead of letting it be lumped into the oral surgery category. Your treatment plan is going to be off. Or every single time you go to print a bone graft, you're like, I have to manually change that to 0% because I know. So stop manually changing your treatment plans. Focus instead on your office software's capabilities and the default settings that you can change so that when you put in those percentages, your treatment plans will do what they need to do.
Okay, are there any easy ways to learn a little bit more about the office software's capabilities? Anybody that they should be calling to, hey, how do I utilize this to its maximum capabilities?
Yeah, calling the support and asking for a senior level tech is probably still my best recommendation. Each office is a little bit unique in sometimes how they like things done, and having somebody who is an expert on the software can best navigate you to set it up the way that you want. But there are tons of YouTube videos and webinars for all of the softwares out there that they can definitely go and review and research for in their own time when they want. But I really probably prefer calling the software and asking for a senior level tech.
Awesome. Okay. Excuse me. Angela, next question's yours. My office manager just negotiated fees for us. Will it work?
Yeah, it will absolutely work. Most office managers or office team members that negotiate fees absolutely can negotiate higher fee schedules. Where we are finding the most success with the way the insurance landscape now plays is through a combination of fee negotiation and network optimization. What that means is, yes, we can negotiate higher direct contracts with most PPOs. What doesn't take into consideration during the fee negotiation of direct contracts is how we can optimize and move networks around so that we can go from an increase of like a 10 to 20% increase to a 40, 50, 60% increase by re-networking. There's always some risk, and we definitely like to go into detail with what it means to re-network and what that looks like. But the even short-term increase in the value of the 40, 50, 60% contracts will certainly outweigh those risks in most scenarios. But yes, your office manager can negotiate higher fees, but I believe that it it's like an average increase of 1 to 7% when an office team member does it. However, we as experts are seeing a 28% increase on average. And I mean, we see it every single day up to 54%, 48% regularly. So I think that the return on investment to allow an expert to do this is beyond, not only does it keep your office manager free to handle the in-office day-to-day operations, which are so major and necessary for proper patient care and patient experience, but also the return on investment for your business side to ensure that the networks are optimized and that it truly benefits you for the long run.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, Tesna, my AI shows boneless, and the insurance company says their AI doesn't show it. How do I battle that?
Oh, the bone loss on the AI. So again, all this AI stuff coming out, I love it. It's great that we're navigating this new world of how to do dentistry and how to submit claims with these AI services. So there are more and more companies coming out now with AI to detect your bone loss and caries and all of that stuff. Make sure that you are using an FDA approved AI. I know you would assume that if your company is offering it to you, or there's a company offering it, that they are certified to do that. But if it's not FDA approved, then it may not matter that your AI is showing that bone loss. And what AI is the insurance company using? We don't know. We might have to ask about that. Are you using an FDA approved AI system? And AI alone cannot diagnose periodontal disease. So for the insurance company to say our AI system didn't find the bone loss, that's cute, but that's not everything that goes into diagnosing SRP. And a lot of the insurance companies are coming back with SRP right now, really hammering down on how much bone loss needs to be shown, and that it is only covered if bone loss. Even if all the other systemic issues are showing, we only pay if there's bone loss. So again, understanding those contracts and understanding what the insurance company is trying to deny these SRPs for is going to be really helpful, but not just in you navigating it. I don't recommend just taking that as the answer and the solution. We need to appeal, and we need to reach out to the insurance commissioner, the state legislator. This needs to be brought to the attention of all the higher ups that this is an issue that the insurance companies are trying to refuse to pay for SRP. And it's very subjective. Some x-rays, depending on the angle, don't show the bone loss as well. So again, we still have this argument of, is the bone loss there or not? And there are so many more factors to SRP than just bone loss. So we need to focus on that as well. But there usually is bone loss in the radiograph. We need to make sure we're showing that and measuring that and disputing that with the insurance companies. But if they said their AI doesn't show bone loss, ask them what their AI is, and then also show them your own physical digital measurements of that bone loss in your system. Even turn off your AI and just go ahead and measure that bone loss and submit that to them. And then if that's not covered, you file an appeal, you send it to the insurance commissioner for your state, as long as it is a non-self-funded plan, and make sure that we are focusing with these commissioners that the bone loss is there, it's measured, and the insurance company is refusing to accept it.
Okay, when filing that appeal, what other information should they have? What is going to give them the best chance of succeeding when doing that appeal?
Yes, making sure that we are pointing out ADA guidelines and AAP guidelines, including all of the systemic factors of the patient. Some offices are noting bone loss, but they're not noting recession and mobility and furcation, all those other things. So we need to notate everything. Make sure that your hygienist is really thorough in those documents and in the chart notes of what stage of perio it is, what inflammation they saw in the tissue. That is an effective guideline for diagnosing. All of those things, and your hygienist knows better than we do at the front. So have them go through their AAP guidelines and notate all of their findings as to why this qualified for periodontal disease. And sometimes there are borderline cases that the hygienist will admit, like, this was borderline, but because of this, I'm still recommending that we move forward with the periodontal scaling and root planing. What is that factor that took it from being borderline to needing to be done? That is a systemic issue or something that the patient is having a physical hardship with brushing or flossing properly. Something that way that the hygienist was like, because of this, I really think it's necessary to go ahead and do the periodontal scaling root planing. If it's borderline, mention it's borderline and mention what tipped you over the board. And then that's in your appeal. They don't have that information unless you provide it. So that the consulting, reviewing doctor is like, this is borderline. I don't know that I would have done it. But if they have that note of why you did, they're like, oh, okay, I agree.
Okay, wonderful. So let's go ahead, go Angela. What is the average write-off from UCR to PPO insurances, and how can they justify that? How can I justify that?
Industry standard for the average write-off is right around 40%, but we can get it significantly lower to maybe a 30% average write-off, 28% average write-off. But we work with practices every single day where we are seeing 60, 65, 70% write-offs, or where they are keeping their UCR fee lower to have that write-off be lower because at some point they were taught, oh, it depends on the write-off, but instead they're actually causing more damage to their future negotiation power, their cash pay patients, their bottom line, and from a business perspective. So yeah, I would say the average is around 35 to 40% write-off, but we can get lower.
I'm just like a little bobblehead over here when Angela talks. I'm like,
I feel the same way when you're talking.
I agree completely. And that's what Angela was saying, was that some offices will keep their UCR low because they don't like to see big write-offs. They're like, if I raise my fee, I just have higher write-offs and I don't like how that looks. But like she said, that's just damaging yourself more and making your situation worse, because then you can't negotiate those fees because they don't see a need for you to have increased rates. So it's okay to have bigger write-offs if you need to, but making sure that you are collecting reimbursement rates that are sustainable for your practice.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so we have a question from the audience. What is the best way to proceed if we obtain fee schedules for the acquisition office for a new owner dentist and no umbrella or individual insurance plan negotiations? Feels like a dead end, and fees are 50 to 60% less than UCR.
Sure. The first thing I would recommend is, where are you getting your data from for the UCR fees? Are you in the 80th to 90th percentile? And is that write-off accurate based on actual numbers for your zip code? Or are those just progressively put in fees for your UCR? The other thing is, I would allow an expert to work with you. I think that everyone really, the people in the practice have so many incredible qualities that are necessary for the practice to run day-to-day operations, for the patient care, for all of that. But what we do on a daily basis, working with the insurance companies, that's all we do. I am never taking a patient phone call. I am never having to treatment plan. All I am doing is fighting and working and gathering data and truly being an expert with these insurance contracts so that we can make sure you're optimized properly. So I would say, first, evaluate your UCR, make sure that those numbers are actual data-driven UCR fees, and then to also work with an expert to see how the credentialing mapping looks for your practice, because there are opportunities to bring in third parties and you can still block out some of those third-party leases. So there's strategy behind it, more so than just saying we have a direct contract or we have a TPA. There's just so much more strategy that can go into it.
Okay, and great follow-up question is, where this came from the audience, where should we get the the UCR fee data from? What's our best resource?
There's online capabilities. My team and we use the Wasserman Medical, so they are pretty standard across the dental and medical industry for the UCRs. But even I think even like Dental Intelligence and Practice by Numbers, I think, offer those data points. But again, they may be limited or different than what we pull from our data standpoint.
Yeah, and I would add to that that I would just be mindful of when you're getting the data from a company like Patterson. And I love Patterson for so many reasons. And it is nice that they offer like the fee schedules for your area, but their data is going off of claims or what their offices have listed in their system. So if an office isn't billing at the correct rates that they should be, that's bringing down where you should be as well. So don't go off of that data. You need to go off of where you should be in the industry, right?
Couldn't agree more. We actually have some Patterson and Henry Schein reps that request the numbers from us versus because they're just skewed, and that's perfect. Like said.
Okay, we were supposed to have one more person on the panel, but unfortunately at the last minute they had an emergency come up and we wasn't able to get them in. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw out those questions and see if you have anything to add on them. Okay, so first question is, and either of you feel free, jump in. I'm not addressing this to anybody in particular. And if you don't have anything to say, well, we can just skip over it. How do you handle billing discrepancies or rejected claims? And what is the average resolution time?
I'd be happy to jump on this. Billing discrepancies, or wait, did you say denial discrepancies or billing discrepancies?
Billing discrepancies or rejected claims.
Yeah. Okay. So billing discrepancies and denied claims, I feel like go hand in hand. I have offices reaching out saying this claim was denied and they had this weird reasoning, and it's one of those implant situations. I get these a lot. So we're billing out an abutment supported, or no, an implant supported crown together with the abutment code, and then their implant is denied and they're upset with the insurance company, but really that's a billing issue. So I'd say the first thing to target is your billing codes, making sure that you are billing the correct and accurate codes. And then if you're getting denials, make sure, again, this goes back to this breakdown of benefits, that you understood and knew the limitations and the exclusions that go together with those codes, so you were already prepared for how they were going to pay. And if they did not pay for a covered service and you can prove that it was required to be done, then one appeal. This is my favorite thing. One appeal and go to the insurance commissioner. Don't spend a year, I can't tell you all the time, a year fighting these denials and again and again and again, and then eventually having to give up and not make it anywhere and write off the claim. Don't do that. One appeal, and I'm going to add to this, actually recently I've been doing this. One appeal, talk with the consultant or the reviewing dentist for that claim, and then file the complaint with the insurance commissioner. And when you're talking with that reviewing doctor, ask them, a lot of times I find that they can see what you're saying. They see that the treatment needed to be done, but they have been given a strict rule by the insurance company of the reason why they have to deny the claim. Like, yeah, I can see that that needed to be done, but they asked me, was there a PA, yes or no? And if I say no PA, then they deny the whole claim, right? Even though from the bite wing, they could see that that crown needed to be done and there was no PA needed for them to do the diagnosis. But the insurance asked a simple yes or no question, and they had to answer that no because there was no PA, and that pushed the claim for denial. When you have that piece of information, when you go to the insurance commissioner, that insurance company has to answer for that. They're not denying these claims based off of what is medically necessity. They're basing it off of how do we get denials.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question based on what you just talked about. I've heard you talk about going to the insurance commissioner a few times. All right, talk about your process. If you have to go that route, what information should you have? What should somebody know to make sure that when they go to the insurance commissioner, they are going to be successful?
Yes, you need to know if it's the insurance commissioner for your state does not have jurisdiction over self-funded plans. They also don't have jurisdiction over Medicare plans. They also don't have jurisdiction if the state was not, or if the plan wasn't written in that state. So make sure you know, is it self-funded and it's not a Medicare and it was written in the state that you're in. You can still file a complaint if it's not written in your state. You just have to go file the complaint with the insurance commissioner for that state that it was written in. So you can still achieve this. And if it's a self-funded plan, you can do a federal complaint on a federal level, and the insurance companies still feel that sting and that burn. If it's Medicare, you can complain with CMS. Yes. I'm like, what's the name of Medicare? So there are other routes for filing these complaints, but just make sure you know what department you're complaining to. My favorite is to go to the insurance commissioner, and sometimes you can call and get this information, and I do advise doing that to the best of your ability, but sometimes the reps don't know. So if you're unsure, you can submit it to your insurance commissioner. They'll review that information to make sure they have jurisdiction. And if they don't, they'll let you know, and sometimes give you the contact information for where to go and file that complaint next, since they don't have jurisdiction. So aside from that, make sure that you know you have used the correct billing and coding, right? And that you did support your claim with good documentation that showed the need for that to be done. If you have done that, then that is all you need to do. If they're saying, we must have a PA for this denied crown because we can't determine whether or not this crown needed to be done, and you've talked to the consultant, he says, I can see the crown needed to be done. They just asked me if it has a PA or not. They're the ones requiring the PA. So this is illegal of the insurance company to do. They're gonna get away with it as long as they can, as long as nobody is reporting them. So we need that information of, we have provided this. It's very clear on this documentation. We talked to the consulting doctor who agreed it is evident in the documentation we submitted. The insurance company is still denying the claim off of something frivolous or, erroneous, because it's not necessary. They don't need it. They're just looking for a reason to deny the claim. And when you point that out, that they are illegally denying the claim and intentionally doing so for the betterment of their company, not for patients' benefits, they're in trouble. They have to answer for that.
I love that. And I also think it's important for billing specialist or the person in the office that's doing the billing is to understand that AI cannot deny a claim. So if it goes back to that question about AI denied this claim, if you find out that AI denied a claim, then you have to push it with the insurance company of who is the reviewing consulting doctor. And oftentimes they'll process the claim and pay it right then, because they pull it up and they see, oh yes, it's a necessary claim, or whatever the treatment was necessary.
Yeah, sometimes just that one appeal will get it paid because you're calling them out and they have to address that situation. If they still deny it after that appeal, then they are intentionally, knowingly processing it wrong, and then they're in trouble. So that's why the insurance commissioners like us to do that appeal, because it gives the insurance company an opportunity to correct the mistake that they made.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, so next question is, can you explain the process for verifying patient insurance information and how to ensure accuracy before submitting claims?
Yeah, I feel like we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Just making sure you have a really good breakdown form and making sure you know what follow-up questions or what things to have on your breakdown form. Angela and I both touched on that with asking if it's a self-funded plan. You can also ask what state it was written in at that point if you want. Exclusions, limitations, those types of things. Make sure everything is on your breakdown form and get it the initial time when that patient is new to your office or when that plan is new to your office.
And what fee schedule to follow is a great question with all the PPO, all these PPO tentacles that keep popping up out of other plans. I think that's a great question to ask. And then also, insurance verification has never been more important than right now. It has always been very, very important, but it's not getting any less important. So finding a rhythm that works best for your practice so that it happens every single time.
Yeah. And what we're finding is that offices are doing the bare minimum of insurance verification. They're just finding out what is the maximum and what is the preventative basic major, just a few things. And then they're like, hey, that's good, because they're rushing to get to the next patient, the next task, the next phone call. So making sure that you have a dedicated person to do your insurance verification, that they're being very thorough with it, is actually super important. Like Angela said, more than ever, because these insurance companies are trying to find more ways or trying to add more exclusions to say that it's covered, make it look like they have all this coverage for a patient, and then they really don't. And then you don't have a leg to stand on because it was already in their contract of their limitations and exclusions.
Absolutely. I learned very early on that patient experience is, of course, super important, but something that has always stuck with me is the number one reason that a patient leaves a practice is due to financial issues. So if you can
Yes.
present that on the front end, you'll never even have to worry about it when it comes down to treatment presentation. Everything will be very, very accurate because you're following a process that is tried and true. So then at the end of the day, you're coming down to less patient attrition, which is the most valuable piece of what we're all trying to do for every practice.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
When it comes to insurance verification, what sort of checklist should the office be following to make sure they're getting the most out of that?
I would say just that breakdown form, making sure they have all the codes that the office offers, and that they have a list of all the exclusions, downgrades, limitations, fee schedules.
I agree.
Yep.
The more detail, the better. We had a full-time person when I was in practice. We had a full-time person that's all they did, insurance verification.
Mm-hmm. It needs to be a full-time job, and doctors get frustrated with it, but I'm telling you, it's so important. And like Angela said, that's something that stuck with me early on too, was like, that's the number one reason they leave is billing issues. And it makes sense because they trust the doctor, they love the doctor, but, and it's not usually the office's fault. It's not really that Jane Doe is messing up your billing. It's that the insurance didn't pay how they expected it, and patients don't understand the insurance. And if your front office doesn't understand the insurance, then they're just frustrated and they leave. So I would also add that if you are disputing a denied claim, notify your patient of the denial that you received, why they're denying it, and what you're doing to dispute it, and show them that evidence as well. Make sure they know that you're going to bat for them, and this is an extra courtesy to them. And when they're made aware of these issues, they rely and trust on you, and they know that the insurance company does not have their best interest at heart. And they also have the opportunity to complain, switch plans, or complain to their HR department as well if they're really unhappy with the coverage that they have.
I love that.
Okay, next question. What tools or software do you recommend to track claims and payments, and how do you ensure that we receive timely reimbursement from insurance companies?
As far as softwares, it depends on which practice management software you're using for compatible claims management systems or clearinghouses that sync up with your software. My favorite software is Open Dental with Dental Exchange link up. I think a lot of people are loving that mix right now. There are some newer softwares that I've just never worked with because I haven't been billing now for a couple of years. So I don't know. Tessina has a different.
Yeah. Dental Exchange has gone back and forth for me as to whether or not I love it. It's had its struggles. I think all the softwares do as far as clearinghouses go. My favorite was Vine's Remote Light version, but they don't offer the Remote Light anymore. So that was like my favorite one. So Dental Exchange is kind of coming up there. Vine has a new Trellis one, and it has lots of AI. So I'm but because it's new in the AI, there's a lot of glitches still, and there's a lot of kinks to be worked out. So I'm kind of loving it, and I'm loving the potential, but I'm having a lot of complaints from a lot of my offices on the information not being accurate, or giving them weird claim rejections. We had one the other day that the oral cavity code, the clearinghouse with Vine Trellis, was requiring a 4-digit oral cavity code. And I was like, that doesn't exist. So I was like, so they called me and it's like, you're going to have to call Vine. I don't know what they're doing. But it's that AI system is trying to catch it and code it, and they've screwed up something. So yes, having a good clearinghouse is definitely important, and having a good software. Right now, Open Dental is the best software for accurate treatment planning and estimates. And there's a lot of features throughout a lot of softwares that you can pick, but because billing is so essential to patient retention, Open Dental is still the best for that. As of right now, I know there's new softwares coming out, but making sure that you understand that software and how to use it is going to be the second most important thing you can do. You can have the very best software in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, it's not benefiting you at all.
Absolutely.
And to maintain healthy claims and outstanding, I think tracking your AR on a daily and weekly basis is very important. Again, it's having, just like an insurance verification specialist in your practice, it is having a true insurance billing expert, whether you outsource, keep it in your office, whatever it looks like, you need a true expert on that, because your RCM is what keeps your practice afloat at the end of the day. You have to be able to pay your employees, pay your team, and pay yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I totally forgot that second part of the question. That is perfect. I agree completely with Angela. Checking it daily and weekly. The goal to get to is to have your claims paid between 7 and 15 days. And most offices that we come across are still heavy in the over 90 days, 60 to 90 day range. Some offices we find are at 45, 50, and those are great, but you can get it down to the 7 to 15 days. And sometimes to do that, you need to sign up with the EFT payments because they will pay you in 24 hours. And you'll get less denials because they're pressured to get those EFTs paid faster than they do the regular claims. So I would also look at signing up for EFTs. I don't really recommend using like a Zealous or a third-party company that hosts all the payments in one spot. You have to pay for that, and they're saying it's for your convenience because they'll host it all. Unless you're running like 6 practices and 30 doctors, I don't think that that's necessary. You can just sign up for the free EFT option with that insurance company directly and just check their website every day for the EOBs.
Totally agree.
Okay, and we have a question. Do you have a template for the insurance breakdown form?
Several. Angela, do you have some as well?
I do. I'll share one. I think I have one on my LinkedIn, but I'll share it again today. And honestly, making a combination of what works best for your practice, these templates really are just templates. So I think every office should customize it for what they're needing.
Yeah, just go through those codes and what your needs are and try to make it as clean as possible. Sometimes I see it kind of messy and it asks for something here and then something relating to that also down here at the bottom. And so you're kind of all over your page. So just try to get a streamlined list of like what you're needing. And a lot of offices like to have it to just one page. It's okay if it's 2 pages. Just as long as you're organized and you're thorough, that's the main point.
Especially with a lot of general dentists offering more services now than ever, the codes keep getting bigger and then the font keeps getting smaller. So
yes,
totally real.
They're like, I just want it all on one page, but then you're like, it's a mess and it's small and I can't get to anything. So it's okay to have it more than one page. Also, something I've been seeing and I've been using myself is some Google Forms. So you can do Google Sheets and they can just be fillable where you have your drop down options of like, does it downgrade, molars or bicuspids, and you can just choose a drop down. I'm kind of old school. It actually feels faster for me to just write it down and I can scribble and use my shorthand and it just feels faster. But that's what I've been doing for ever and ever. But some of these newer, younger kids might be faster at using a Google document and having that just filled out there. And then they just drag it and put it into the patient's images section.
Okay, perfect. And next question. How do you ensure compliance with all healthcare regulations, including, really that should be especially HIPAA, when handling patient billing and insurance information?
I think every office should have a HIPAA compliance seminar and make sure that they're staying up to date. But everything needs to be handled in a HIPAA compliant manner. So you need to start by educating your team members and then enforcing those rules. As a practice owner can enforce all of that. But I think the first thing is education. So educate what's allowed, what's not allowed, and then hold everyone accountable is kind of where I would go.
Definitely. And if you're using companies, third-party companies or anything, make sure they're all HIPAA certified as well. And then you're not as worried about like, you would have to do double the HIPAA if you're using a third-party company that's not HIPAA compliant. So just make sure that all the companies or all the resources you use are all following the same protocols for being HIPAA compliant. And then you don't have to worry as much because they're adhering, you're adhering, everybody's following these rules. And then if a patient calls, this is probably more where I get that concern of like, the husband calls for the wife and wants to know about that, or the daughter calls for the elderly mother. If you have those situations, it's best to have those forms in the beginning when the patient is a new patient and assign who is allowed to have information about that patient. So if it's an elderly woman and her daughter cares for her, you just have that in your new patient forms that they have a list of the people who are allowed to call and ask about what treatment and what finances that are going on with that patient. And then you're not as worried about that. If a dental office calls and asks for x-rays because you're both HIPAA compliant, again, you are able to share those x-rays. If you're sending documentation to an insurance company, they have their HIPAA guidelines they have to follow as well. So you can block out a whole bunch of stuff that you don't want them to see if you want, but really it's not that necessary because they have their own HIPAA guidelines they have to follow.
Also, HIPAA is US based. So when you are outsourcing, it's important that you understand who you're outsourcing with so that they're abiding by the United States of America HIPAA guidelines. So that is super important as a practice owner to make sure of. And then also to double check if you are outsourcing, what type of insurance they have for their company and their team members. So you want to make sure that you're working with a reliable resource.
Okay, and at the beginning, you mentioned HIPAA seminars. Is there a third-party service that can do those seminars? Anything you recommend?
There are, I'm drawing a blank. I don't know, Tessina, if you know of anyone, but I see it all the time on the Facebook groups of who do you recommend for HIPAA or compliance training? And there are really some reputable people in the industry that can help with that.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
and just go to
Facebook and ask.
Yeah, go to Facebook or the ADA website is a great resource for that. If you go to the ADA website, they'll have a list of recommendations and contacts you can reach out to.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, one more question. What steps do you take to prevent and address any potential fraud or abuse in the billing process?
That's a heavy question. So that's pretty loaded. Making sure that whoever's handling billing and or taking payments is always tracking everything and knowing how to properly enter them. It can be really messy and confusing when we see reports of a payment being entered and then a payment being deleted. That can happen because they were just trying to fix a deposit slip or the check was entered wrong, or it can be all kinds of things. It can also be an indication for embezzlement. So making sure that your staff has good training, and this is something Angela can probably agree with me on, doesn't happen very often. So these people aren't trained in the software. They're making do with what they have, and they're just trying to make it work. And insurance is very complicated, so they have to make these adjustments and these changes all of the time. So if you're trying to I would recommend filing reports or running reports and tracking all that for yourself to make sure nobody is fraudulently doing anything. But if you're running those reports and it's not accurate because they don't know how to use the software, you're not able to really know or decipher what is happening in your software. Get them proper training on the software. Get them proper admin training on best practices of how to address when those payments are entered in wrong or when insurance messes something up. How do they fix it in the software so that it's clean and doesn't look like they put in a payment and then deleted a payment? Right, Angela? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. So I think that doctors need to really take control. You are a business owner as much as you are a doctor. So understanding your reports, what they mean for you and your practice is the first step of education on your side. And then on the other side, I feel like a ball has been dropped because I even hear of different lawyers telling their purchasing doctors that they can submit claims under the selling doctor's tax ID for a limited period during the credentialing period. And that couldn't be more false. So we have, doctors come in, they say, oh, the selling doctor, it's written in our contract, is allowing me to submit claims under the selling doctor's tax ID and during the credentialing period, and I have to go in and educate them. I am definitely not the insurance police, but I think that having the right education is super important. So I think that making sure that if you're acquiring a practice, that you understand what the credentialing period actually looks like, how to operate the right way so that you're not submitting or your team member is not submitting claims fraudulently. And I think that just all of this comes to education and working with the correct experts in the industry to make sure that you are optimizing your revenue, but also practicing proper procedures.
Excuse me. Okay, so we have covered a lot today, but there's so much to talk about. I want to give you each a chance to, what holes have you seen? What things did we not get it to that you would love to address before we put a pin in this?
I think for me, it's about really knowing your strong suits, and the team members and the dentist are not educated enough in the insurance piece. And maybe it's because you don't need to be. You need to know certain guidelines, expectations, and how to do things properly from the in-office piece. But from the other side, let an expert, just as we let dentists be the ones to drill on our teeth, let an expert help guide you in the right way so that you're not just kind of blindly figuring this out. We can get you streamlined. We can make sure that you're up to date, and we can make sure that you are as lucrative as possible the entire time. You don't have to wait to lose until you can come for a comeback.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of the offices that reach out to me or come to me are already in a very desperate position. And so getting some training ahead of time for yourself and for your staff and on the software, right? Everything we've talked about today is proper education and proper training. With those tools in place, your office will be very successful and very prepared for anything that comes your way.
Okay, we've got one last question that is very good that I think would be a great one to wrap up with. What would you say to a dentist acquiring an almost fee-for-service office? Should they go a network or try it without?
Try it without, my friend. Try it without.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. I agree 100%. And don't shoot yourself in the foot. He has a good thing going, or the previous doctor has a good thing going. Keep it going and just add to it with marketing.
Those patients are educated that it is a fee-for-service practice. Keep it going. If you can keep that going, you are doing well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I recently had a conversation with a doctor who'd had a fee-for-service office for years, got talked into going into network. Oh, your patient base will grow and blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, I have more patients and less revenue.
Working harder than ever, making less money. I see it. I'm sure we all see it every single day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you both so much for your time today. It has been amazing. And when we've talked about AI quite a bit, it is very interesting. We actually had a webinar here a few nights ago about AI in dentistry, and it was quite interesting and educational and somewhat alarming. I love AI. ChatGPT is one of my favorite things to play with, but I don't exactly trust it all the time. But hey, it's a great way to get a little bit of info. All right. Thank you both. And we'll move on to Rebecca. Rebecca, are you here?
I'm here. Hi.
Okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, screen 3. Okay, can you see my screen?
I can.
All right, so go ahead, introduce yourself.
Oh, introduce myself. Okay, great, no problem. So I'm Rebecca Herring. I am the CEO founder and for Transformational Dental Coaching. And I'm also the director of healthcare operations for Rocket Station, which is a virtual staffing company who we provide virtual assistance for your dental practice that's tailored and trained specifically for your team.
Okay, wonderful. All right, now before we actually jump into our questions, you jumped onto the chat with some information on training and seminars for HIPAA. I just want to go ahead and see if you would go ahead and relay that information to our audience before we jump into the questions that we're supposed to go and do today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to share. Tia Hunter has a great training for both HIPAA and OSHA for practices. She also puts out an annual calendar that helps clinical teams stay on track for all the things that they're supposed to do throughout the year to also stay in compliance. So she's a great resource to reach out to if you're looking for any type of those compliance trainings for your practice.
HIPAA's important, but so is OSHA. That's a very good one to bring into it.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump into your questions.
Sounds good.
First up is, how are virtual assistants helping dental practices navigate staffing shortages without burnout?
Absolutely. This is such a great area, and I'm really glad that we're presenting this to your audience today. So thanks for having me. Virtual
pleasure.
assistants are kind of changing the game for dental practices that are really feeling stretched thin. They're stepping in to handle some of those essential but really time-consuming tasks, like you guys were discussing earlier, like insurance verification and patient scheduling, billing, phone support, follow-up, all of those kind of things that are really time-consuming. These are the tasks that often kind of pile up or they fall through the cracks and the office is overstaffed and they're overwhelmed. When we can delegate these tasks to a trained virtual assistant, practices are giving their in-office team room to breathe. They're not feeling like they're balancing so many balls or plates in the air. So instead of having to multitask to the point of exhaustion, the front desk team can really focus on welcoming the patients, creating meaningful experiences, being able to feel like they can sit down and do a treatment plan presentation, and they're not having to choose between that phone ringing and other things that are happening that end up either making them feel like they have to rush through it or they're having to choose. So it's not necessarily about getting more done, but it's about reducing that stress, boosting the morale in the office, and building more of a sustainable work environment. So if your team is feeling burnt out or you feel like you're constantly behind, this might be a smart support option that the office just hasn't tapped into yet.
Okay, it makes perfect sense. What are the top 5 tasks virtual assistants can do for a dental office?
This is probably one of the most common questions that I get asked, and this is really where our virtual teams get a shine. I would say probably the top 5 core areas where virtual assistants can make the biggest impact, or maybe more of an immediate impact on a front desk team. 1, insurance verification, breakdowns. This alone saves your team lots of hours and speeding up those case presentations. Like ladies were mentioning just a minute ago in their presentation, making sure, again, having someone dedicated in your practice that can focus on those insurance verifications, making sure that they're correct, calling the insurance company, sitting on hold, really time consuming. But we don't want the team that's in the office doing that. It takes them away from patient care and being able to engage in great conversations with our patients that are in the office. But when you have someone that's dedicated, like a virtual assistant, they can get all the codes that you need. They can put the breakdowns in, make sure that they're correctly put into your PMS system. Because honestly, my opinion is the insurance that's in your practice is the foundational base for the success of a practice. If anything goes in wrong, incorrectly, the whole system, your whole revenue cycle management is frustrating, I'll say. Your calculations for your treatment plans are wrong. The amount that you collect from your patient can be wrong. And it really makes the job afterwards in collecting that difference from the patient frustrating. And the patient feels like they can't trust the practice either. Like, you told me this was my out of pocket and now it's something else. So I think that being able to have someone who's really dedicated and detail oriented, putting that into your system saves the front desk a lot of time. Honestly, the virtual assistants, the cost for them is so much lower, but they are so dedicated. It's well worth looking into as an option. Another area is patient scheduling and confirmations. Virtual assistants can keep your schedule full and organized. This helps to reduce no-shows and downtime. When we implemented them into our practice 5 years ago, this was an area where we saw the biggest impact almost immediately. When they are accepting and taking your phone calls for your practice, they get that phone call of cancellation and they can immediately start working on filling the hole, even same day. So, when we're in our practices and we're so busy, someone cancels, it's like, patient canceled, but you're being pulled in so many different directions that we don't always have the time that we would like to get it filled. So one of the biggest impacts our virtual team had for our practice was reducing our open chair time by 80%. And it had a huge impact on our production the first year they started working with us. Another really great area is managing your recare and your treatment follow-up. So every time a patient needs a reminder, a lot of times we have our softwares that can send the reminders and those types of things, but being consistent or having a really meaningful conversation with a patient that hasn't been in for a year, 18 months, sometimes we are really quick with those reminders. And we call and say, "Hey, John, I'm calling from Dr. Smith's office, and looks like it's been a year and a half since you've been in. Would like to get you scheduled. Can I schedule that for you?" "Nah, not today. I don't have time." And our virtual assistants have the time to reach out to say, "Hey, we really care about you, and we want to make sure you're okay. Are you having any pain, sensitivity from, whatever Dr. Smith may have diagnosed, the crown, the root canal? We'd like to get you in. We don't want to see you in pain." And that brief interaction can have a huge impact on your patients when they feel like the team, the doctor really care about them and are reaching out with a sincere plea to get them taken care of as a patient in their practice. So another really big impact that VAs can have on your patient base. Billing, claims, AR follow-up, another really great area where, again, our VAs are willing to sit on the phone, on hold, wait for those the insurance people to answer and say, "Hey, why was this claim denied? Can you tell me what we need?" And they can help resubmit or at least provide you with the information that the office in-office team may need to get those claims repaid. So that's also another really great one that we too had seen a lot of success with. Last one, being one of the top 5, I think, are answering the phones, handling messages, and helping our new patients with confirming that their paperwork had been done. They can act as an extension of your front desk. They keep the communications really smooth, and they also are very, very professional and engaging with your patients. And so if you're finding like these tasks aren't getting done, they aren't really just tasks. Our practice saw them truly as revenue drivers and reputation builders because they really drew those conversations well with our patients and welcomed them back into our practice.
Okay, next question. What kind of improvements or changes in efficiency do practices typically see after hiring a VA?
You bet. This is a great question. I've been working with implementing and training virtual assistants for the last 5 years. And so these are some of the things that a lot of dental practices have reported or, been really excited about once they've brought one on. Shorter hold times and quicker callbacks. When our patients reach out to us and they need some support or they need some help, sometimes we get really busy and they get pushed to the next day, sometimes 2 days out. And those virtual assistants are very, very dedicated to making sure that their job gets done correctly. And they can reach out to those patients. They can provide that support for them. Another area I think is a more consistent follow through when it comes to billing questions, reaching out when we're trying to reach a patient to get their insurance information, or we're trying to follow up on questions the patient may have had about a claim, or just trying to get someone rescheduled sometimes is a great way for our virtual assistants to support our practice. Because our patients are more informed and they're more engaged working with our virtual assistants, we find that when a patient calls back and has a question about their treatment, or they need to have a question answered and the VAs can support it immediately, they are more likely to accept the treatment that's been presented to them and has been diagnosed by the doctor, to accept it, move on, and get that appointment scheduled in a timely manner. Lower overhead costs. We have happier staff. They're not as burned out. They're not as tired, and they feel like they have a little bit better work-life balance because they're having more support with that virtual assistant acting as almost like a personal assistant for them, and fewer mistakes because they have more support in helping with some of the areas that are things that sometimes our front desk, we just don't really want to do. And so they will own it and they'll do a really great job. Smoother patient experiences, that when our patients are happy, they're willing to leave reviews, and honestly, they're willing to refer their friends to our practices as well, which is also great for our practice, for our business, and growing our patient base and keeping the practice growing and being successful. In many cases, I think that the team, front and back, in the clinical side, are surprised by how much time gets freed up so that the team that's in the office really gets to focus on the patient, and how quickly it really can happen. A lot of the practices I work with are really surprised that they're seeing results within the first month of their virtual assistant working with their practice. And, if anyone who's listening, if you were to just close your eyes for a second and imagine if the phones weren't ringing in your practice and you had someone who was doing your insurance verification and your breakdowns and putting them into your PMS system, if they just did those two things alone, imagine the difference. Your whole front office team would feel a little more relaxed. And that's honestly what a VA is going to bring to the table for the front desk team.
Okay, you've kind of hit on this a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out in case there's something you haven't included already. But how do VAs impact the patient experience in a dental practice?
Absolutely. Patients, they'll probably never meet your virtual assistant face to face unless you decide to put one on a screen at your front desk, or they assist with the checkout process, which some practices have implemented and been very successful. But your patients are going to feel a difference. Your front desk team is going to be so much more relaxed and able to assist them without feeling like they're choosing between the patient that's standing in front of them, the phone ringing, being pulled in different directions from other people in the practice. But most importantly, it's going to be those follow-ups. It's returning phone calls to patients on time. They feel like they're getting their answers, insurance questions or concerns that patients may have. They don't linger for days. Patients feel like they get taken care of and that they're truly cared about, whether it's the in-office team or it's on a phone call with your virtual assistant. They will truly feel that difference when talking with anyone in your practice, virtual or in office.
Okay, everything you've talked about so far is more geared towards making the front office experience a lot easier. But how does this impact the doctors and practice owners and assist them in getting more of their day back?
Absolutely. One of the biggest shifts that we see is the mindset of the doctor or the practice owner. With the VA handling a lot of the administrative loads, the doctors aren't stuck after hours trying to finish up their charts or follow up on insurance or try to fill some of the staffing team member gaps that they're filling or trying to fill in their practices. A virtual assistant fills this role for stability in a practice. We know that we have a staffing shortage, and a lot of offices are really struggling to find great team members. So with a virtual assistant, we have a broader talent pool by utilizing the entire country. We get our virtual assistants from the Philippines, and they're very detail oriented. They're very dedicated and very loyal. The virtual assistants we placed 5 years ago in our dental practice, they're still there. They're still very dedicated to our practice and its growth. And so a lot of the team, generally the dentists and the office managers or the leaders in the practice, feel like they aren't stuck. And when they do have a shift in their team, whether that's someone has a baby, somebody has to move because of a spouse's promotion, whatever it may be, they have the stability. Someone is still there, making sure that the office is still humming. They're still going regardless of changes. And the front office, a team that's still in the practice, doesn't have to absorb that entire workload in order to keep going, which is generally what tends to happen when someone ends up leaving is we throw the rest of the workload on those that are still in the practice, and they end up getting very burnt out and stressed because they have almost double the work to do. So our virtual assistants really can help dentists and office managers with some of their responsibilities, finishing up maybe some chart notes, not signing them, but finishing them up for them, following up on some of those insurance questions, and supporting doctors. We have a lot of dentists that hire virtual assistants to be their personal executive assistants that help them with a lot of the things that dentists feel like they have to do after hours. So that time that they are helping the leaders in the practice, the dentists, the office managers, that time can now be spent where it truly matters. Whether that means the dentist now has more time to focus on patient care and providing that excellent service, maybe a little more time building his business, or hopefully our goal is that it gives the doctor more time to take a break and spend more time with his family.
Okay. We're running short on time. I'm trying to pick the best question. So I'm going to kind of do the last ones out of order because this one here I really think is a good one, especially for like the office manager listening today that's like, we need this in our practice. What would you say to convince a practice owner still on the fence to hire a VA? Or what tools do you give the office manager that says, yeah, doc needs to hire a VA to help our team?
Absolutely. I think this is a great question, a great way to kind of tie all this together. When someone's kind of on the fence about it, I say start small, start simple. You don't have to outsource everything. I know I've presented a lot of different ways that we can utilize virtual assistants. You don't have to outsource everything all at one time. Begin with just one virtual assistant who's going to work maybe part-time for you for a little bit, or give them a single area like the ladies were discussing earlier on this webinar, which is just insurance verification and breakdowns for you. Let them get in there and get started and make sure that this is going into your PMS system correctly, accurately, and let them reach out to the insurance and get all the things that you need that we aren't getting on our breakdowns anymore off the portals, and let them make that impact on your practice. Track that impact. Most practices are amazed at how quickly they see results, and then they want to start expanding. They want to add more and more virtual assistants and team members to support their practices. Hiring a VA isn't just a staff decision. It's a growth strategy. It protects your team. It protects your patients and their experience in the practice. And it really does create a space where you can lead your team with less stress.
Okay, we have time for one more question. I'm going to take this from the audience. What is the going rate for a virtual assistant? When a doctor is looking to hire one, what should they be looking at?
Fantastic. Great question. So at Rocket Station, our virtual assistants are $12 an hour for full-time, which is 40 hours a week, and part-time is $14 an hour, and that's for 20 hours a week. We do something very different, and I think that this is really important to mention because not a lot of virtual assistant companies provide this. We work with the office to provide the SOP or the standard operating procedure or training manual for the virtual assistant. We work with the office to see what systems or tasks or responsibilities you'd like this virtual assistant to have. We work with the office to determine what they are, and then we create a training manual that can be essentially 60 to 100 pages with pictures and click here, enter this information, go here, very, very detailed on how the job should be done. We train that virtual assistant tailored to your practice, and they are ready and efficient on day one. The practice gets this manual, and so does the virtual assistant, so that everybody effectively has an SOP so that we can be effective and efficient and grow your practice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on today.
Thank you.
And now it is time to turn it over to my boss and the CEO of Aqua, Naren Alaraja. Hi, Naren.
Hey, how are you, Laila?
Just fine.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I think I have 20 minutes. Is that correct, Laila?
We have you from now until 1:45. So yes.
Perfect. So 20 minutes. Yeah. So I'll try to do this quickly. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Laila, for leading this, and really appreciate everyone. So let me share my screen. Tell me if you can see it. Can you see my screen?
It's coming. There we go.
Perfect. So the 4 things every successful dental practice does. And and we learned this from the top 1% of practices. Many of you know I have been in dentistry for close to 18 years now. So I have worked with few hundred dental practices. 80% of our clients happen to be dental practice owners. And of course, I've collaborated with many of you who are coaches and consultants, including Gary Takas, Ben Tuney, and so forth. So, I do know a lot of people in dentistry over the last 18 years. So I've been observing the top 1% and hopefully sharing some of that with all of you. So Laila, she's our host today. She works with me, and she is an expert when it comes to helping practices figure out how well they're doing with marketing and help them go to the next level. So what are the 4 things every successful dental practice does? So number 1 is they're metrics driven. So I'm going to talk about some key metrics. And they create an environment where it's not driven by one person. One of the things I see with struggling practices is, 1 or 2 people carry all the weight. Typically, it's the owner and or the office manager. And pretty much they're responsible for everything, every problem, every opportunity. And it doesn't work, because when you have 6 people, but 2 people are responsible for everything, then it feels overwhelming and it creates burnout. And it'll end up with either the office manager leaving or, the dental practice owner quitting. Next is the successful practices are systems driven. So I'm going to touch on that. And finally, the best practices have a marketing plan and a strategy that's able to attract and keep great patients. So that's the next thing I'm going to work on. So each one of these strategies, builds on the next strategy, and so first, at the bottom of the layer is the dashboard, which is the metrics, and then comes accountability. So just because you have metrics doesn't mean it's going to work. You need people responsible for those metrics. So like clearly being able to say, okay, who is responsible for, booking doctor to schedule? So in other words, doctor to goal. So if, for example, you want the doctor to make $2,000 a day in dentistry, there needs to be a person who's booking those appointments into doctor's schedule for every single day, where they know they have to hit that target of, making sure he has $2,000+ worth of dentistry in his schedule every day. So accountability is key. Otherwise, you can sit there and talk about, oh, we want the doctor to do $2,000 a day, but it won't happen because there's nobody accountable for booking those patients into the doctor's schedule. Then you need systems. Now, you going back to, booking doctor to goal, you need a system on how to do that. Like, for example, one of the systems that I've heard of is, the rocks, sand, and water. So for example, you put the big cases first. So if you want the doctor to do $2,000, what are the biggest cases he can work on that day? Maybe a $1,000 case, a $2,000 case. So just those 1 or 2 cases will pretty much cover the $2,000. So you teach that system to the doctor scheduling coordinator. So they put the rocks first, the big cases first. Then they put the $100, few $100 cases next. That's like the, water. And then finally they put the checkups and so forth, where you don't make any money. So you start with the big cases first. So that's the system that this person who's accountable for booking doctor to goal would do. Finally, if you don't have the right patients, now imagine if all your patients are PPO patients and you only get paid 60 cents on the dollar and you're only able to do tooth dentistry, it's going to be very, very, very hard to book doctor to goal, right? Because, you won't have those big cases. Therefore, are you attracting the right patients who appreciate what you do, who are willing to pay for what you do based on your training, based on your special qualifications? And if you don't, then you're going to suffer. So let's start with the metrics. So what are some of the metrics? And let's get into that. The best practices know their numbers. So they don't focus on 300 metrics. So I would argue maximum 10, maybe if you're starting out, maybe even like, 4 to 5 metrics. So start with the core metrics and, build on that. So from the marketing perspective, one of the metrics you want is how many new patients you're getting. Because if you're not getting new patients, especially through marketing, And if all your patients are coming through PPO plans, you have the wrong kind of patients filling your schedules versus the right kind of patients. So you figure out like what are the metrics that are important to your success. If you feel like you're not able to do those big cases, are you getting those big case patients? So like think through, given your goals, what are the metrics? And this is where a coach would come in handy. I know we heard from really smart people today. Gary is a friend of mine, and he's a wonderful coach as well. So get someone to help you figure out the right metrics. The 4 metrics that I'm a huge fan of, and of course I have a bias, I come from the marketing perspective. So the 4 metrics that you need to include that have a marketing bent to it are call conversion rate. So what is call conversion rate? So this is a problem I see with many practice owners where they are getting a lot of new patients calling, but they're not booking them into appointments. The typical American practice only is booking 1 out of 3 new patients. So you don't want to be like the average practice that's only getting 1 out of 3 patients to book. What if you can take that number to 80%? So figure out what your call conversion rate is. I would argue 90% of the people here will not know what their call conversion rate is because you don't have a scientific method of figuring it out. Every call must be listened to, then AI or people should listen to those calls and then categorize them. How many booked, how many didn't book. Based on that, you can figure out your call conversion rate. Know your call conversion rate. Daily production and how much of it do you collect. So, once you have the daily goal, you can say how much of that is going to come from hygiene, how much of that is going to come from the doctor. And then you have to make sure the doctor is hitting his goal, or the scheduling coordinator for the doctor is scheduling doctor for the goal, as well as the hygiene scheduling coordinator is having enough hygiene appointments scheduled to hit the hygiene goal. So together you have the daily production goal. And the other thing is how much are you collecting? And I know a good metric I've heard of is that, you want to collect more than, like, you shouldn't have any AR less than 20 days. So you want to make sure that outstanding money owed is, within a certain amount of your monthly collections. Again, you need to customize this. So I don't want to give you a cookie cutter number. I think this is something you need to do based on where your practice is at. Another marketing metric, Google reviews per month. I would recommend every single one of you here should try to aim to get at least 10 or more Google reviews a month. This is extremely important. And then, of course, marketing ROI. So you need to know, okay, I'm getting 10 new patients from SEO. How much is it costing me? I'm getting 2 new patients from Google Ads. How much is it costing me? That'll give you the return on investment. So you can divide the amount of money you spend on that marketing method by the number of patients. So you will know how much does a single patient from that marketing method cost you. Why do you need to know this? Because the ones that are costing you the most, so for example, if Google Ads is costing you 5 times as much, which is what we see, versus Google SEO, then of course you want to do less Google Ads and more Google SEO. Everyone is accountable and responsible for the success of the practice. That is true, but you have to divide and conquer. If everyone is responsible for everything and accountable for everything, nobody's responsible for anything and accountable for anything. So you need to have point people responsible for specific things. Again, don't start with 300 things or 10, 20 things. Start with 5 things, 6 things. And who is responsible for those 6 things? Who's responsible for booking doctor to goal? If his goal is $2,000, who is that person? That should be their primary job. Make them accountable for that. So you need to have people responsible for specific targets. You need to have a mechanism to incentivize them, whether it's through a bonus, if they hit their target or exceed their targets. And if they're not hitting their targets, you need to have crucial conversation to sort it, to fix it. Because if you don't, that piece will be weak. So let's say you're not booking doctor to goal, you're not going to hit your production targets. So go to the underlying root cause as to why you're not hitting production targets and fix it. The best practices stay accountable. Dentistry isn't a one-man show. Everyone plays a role. It's like a sports team. I mean, those of you who are fans of sports, there is a team of people defending and a team of people going on the offense and so forth and so forth. So different people know what they need to know. If you're a fan of football, there is this one person whose only job is to kick the ball. The 3-point goals and so forth. So that's all they do, nothing else. So that's all they do. They become the best at the world at it. So you need to know who's responsible for what, and you need to help them, support them, and then of course incentivize them as they hit those goals. So building champions. So one of the tips I can share with you is you can't force somebody to do something. Some people like certain things. Some people don't like certain things. Somebody who is, perhaps, personable and loves people could be the one answering the phone. So their metric could be call conversion rate, like what percent of the new patients who are calling are booking appointments. Now, somebody who doesn't like, who's not a people person and so forth, perhaps, but is very good at numbers and very good at follow-ups, might be responsible for collecting money from the insurance company. So if you want to make sure the paperwork is filled correctly and on time and you're getting all the dollars, make that person's goal. Again, you have to clearly define what the goal is. So it's very black and white, very measurable, and they know what it is and they can hit it. And I think also we need the goals to be not activities, but results. Something like scheduling doctor to goal and making sure the doctor has at least $2,000 worth of dentistry on his day. That's an outcome. That's results. Saying, well, do your best and put 20 people, that's not results or outcome, right? Be very careful when we set goals to make it outcome based. Make it something, a number that matters to you. That $2,000, if that's your number that matters to you, then make that the goal. Saying 20 patients, who cares? You could be, booking 20 patients who even then might not, amount to $2,000 versus you could book 3 patients who easily can do $2,000. So be very clear on setting the right goals. I see a lot of practices making a lot of mistakes when it comes to, not picking the right goals. And I think once you give these kind of clear goals and you make it very black and white and give them ideally one goal to focus on, because if you give them too many goals, they can't do anything. So just a single goal, but a really, really important goal, you would be surprised at how people step up. Systems. I know I kind of alluded to systems. Best practices are systems driven, not people driven. And the reason is people can come and go. When somebody leaves, you don't want you to go back to square one and start all over again. You want it to be like step by step what you do, well documented, and now you can leverage it and continue doing that. So best practices are systems driven. I mean, if your practice is people driven, then of course you won't be able to succeed. That's why systems, like I can tell you horror stories after horror stories about why people driven practices fail. Like there's one particular instance that I can think of recently. That particular practice has a wonderful office manager and she was the brains and she literally did most of the important things and it's all in her head. And then she leaves and then nobody knew what she did or how she did it. And now it took almost 2.5 years for them to just recover and get back to where they were. So this practice that was doing extremely well ended up going in this, vicious cycle of, downturn, and things got bad to worse. Of course, after that person left, the numbers started dropping and the doctor got more irritable and that turned off even more people and it just created this doom loop. So you don't want to be in that situation. So having clear-cut systems, like for example, getting Google reviews, there could be a very clear process on how you go about getting Google reviews. And once that is known and once everybody accepts it and once there are people responsible for it, it's no longer a big deal. Even if that person no longer is doing that role, maybe they left or maybe they want to do something else, you can now take that system and assign it to somebody else. Marketing strategy that is cost effective and improves over time. This is important because practices that are PPO driven, their big problem is it's kind of like, we say that life is like like a canvas. You can draw anything you want, but imagine you have the bad paint and bad canvas. It doesn't matter what great painter you are, you can't draw good things. So think of marketing as the canvas. In other words, your patients, right? So it brings in awesome patients and where you can do awesome dentistry with. So it's easier to get people to buy into you when they're aligned on the why. So for example, the patients care about a beautiful smile, and you are an expert in beautiful smiles. You are aligned on the why. They will seek you out. They will find you. Your job is to help them realize that you are the one who can do the best job for them through the case studies by dominating Google. So when they're looking for certain, kind of cases, let's say veneers or Invisalign, whatever that you are passionate about the why, and they also want that, now there's alignment. And when they go to the page, because you rank on Google, and then once they're on the page, you have cases, videos, testimonials. So they are very, 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 very likely to, book that appointment and call the office. So it's much better patient versus, a PPO patient. The only reason they came to you is you do free dentistry, right? You're on the PPO plan and you take the insurance, and their first question is it covered? If it's not covered in their mind, the why is not what's driving them. What's driving them is the why of is it covered? So you're doing free dentistry in their mind, so they don't care, right? So they don't care that you have 20 years of experience. They don't care that you have special training. They don't care that your recommendations are going to be good for them long term, right? Because their why is it covered by insurance? So try to attract patients who are aligned with your why. So what that means is whether it's smile driven or whether it's health driven, rank for those keywords, convince them or show them proof with testimonials, videos, etc., or cases that you are really good at that. And that's the marketing funnel that you need to think through. So think of marketing itself as a system, right? PPO and ads bring in random patients who are looking for either ads bring in people who want a deal, or PPO brings in people who want free dentistry. So don't do that. So those people are not aligned on why. And then once they come in, you end up, especially if you're a PPO driven practice, you're working harder and harder. Why? PPO plans keep paying you less and less when your costs go up and up and up. Your wages are going up, your rent is going up, but your PPO is not increasing their fees paid to you. So you're working harder and harder to make less and less money. And that's what causes health issues, burnout, and reduces the quality of service. So you don't even have time to get to know your patients. You don't even have time to, understand what's important to them because you have to do more cases just to keep the lights on. So get out of this doom, this negative cycle and start attracting patients who are choosing you because of the why, because of Invisalign, because of, sedation, because of whatever that they care about that you're good at. So attract patients who are aligned with you, based on the why. So for example, great dental care, oral health, that's a why. Sedation, like I have a lot of dentistry, but I'm afraid to go to the dentist. But this dentist makes me feel comfortable and takes care of me without pain. That's a why. So find that why for that patient. And if that's also, in line with your why, because it doesn't mean you have to do sedation, it doesn't mean you have to do XYZ. You can pick and choose the whys that you want to align with patients with. So you start with organic SEO, and I wouldn't recommend paid ads or social media. And the reason is they are typically 5 to 10 times more expensive. So only once organic SEO is maxed out, that's when I would go into paid ads. So it's like a top-up strategy more than a core strategy. Why is organic SEO so less expensive versus paid ads and social media ads? It's because people are choosing you and trusting you, right? Remember, it's not an ad. So when they type in, sedation dentist near me, because they hate pain and they want somebody who can make them feel comfortable, or painless dentist, they trust the answer Google is giving them organically. It's not a paid ad. Paid ad is marked as a paid ad. So they know that paid ad, maybe he's not good, but because he paid Google money, he's showing up. So they're coming in with doubt. Anytime they come in with doubt, they're looking for a reason to leave your site. It's kind of like a relationship where you have one foot out the door. So you want to make sure that's not the case. So you want to make sure that you are attracting people through SEO. And then have a marketing plan. And the marketing plan should be a lot more than SEO. And it should be, start with SEO, but then it should have good landing pages with good cases. So what they thought you really are, because you have proof. So if I am on the Invisalign page, show me the cases of, maybe 6 people or half a dozen people whose lives you have transformed. Show me what they look like before and show me what they look like after. Ideally, the full Facebook picture. Show me the transformation. And then track all these things, right? Track the number of calls you're getting, new patients you're getting. Track the number of people, who are booking appointments. Track the number of keywords you're ranking for. So find out what are the key metrics and then track them. Typically, when it comes to keywords ranking for, you want to rank for at least 100 or more keywords. Most practices fail marketing because they treat it like a switch, not a system. So think of it like a system, step-by-step system with steps, and then you want to make sure each step is good. First step, getting people to find you. That's where SEO comes in. Second step, convincing them through the website, the before and after pictures, the cases, the videos. And the final step is the call conversion, which is the phone is ringing and are you booking appointments or you're not booking appointments. Know your numbers, build a responsible team. We talked about this. So different people are responsible for different numbers. Your marketing company should be responsible for how many keywords are ranking on page one, how many new patient calls are coming in, are all the pages meeting Google standards. So make sure different people are responsible for different things. So you don't need to be responsible for everything. You can delegate your ownership and responsibility. Have systems, like we talked about the system for, getting booking doctor to goal, right? The rocks, sand and water system, right? So have systems for different things. If you want love letter Google reviews, there is a system for that. How do you get people to say wonderful things, not just 1 or 2 line, 2-word reviews, but paragraph reviews? Finally, stick with effective effective plan. So that's it from me. I know I'm running out of time. So if you are interested in marketing, we can definitely help you, especially if you are a PPO driven practice where you feel like you're working harder and harder for making less and less money, and you want to replace that with patients who are choosing you because of the why and are willing to pay full fee, then we can definitely help you. So book a marketing strategy meeting. What we do is we look at your competition, look at how you're doing against your competition online. Are you ranking for keywords? How are you doing in terms of driving people to your website versus your competition? If you're doing well, we'll tell you that. If you're not, we'll tell you why. For example, maybe your NAP consistency is not good. Maybe your Google Lighthouse scores are not good. Whatever the why is, we'll tell you that, and then we'll fix it. So focusing on, understanding where you are and then being able to, solve problems, I think would help you dominate. So this is the link, insuranceuntangled.com / what's the link? I can't see it, but anyways, we'll put the link on show notes. So definitely click on it and sign up on it. And anything you want to add, Laila, about the marketing strategy meeting?
I'm just going to go ahead and read that URL. It was Insurance Untangled. Let me just grab it back here.
Yeah, it's insuranceuntangled.com, webinar MSM.
Yes. Okay. There we go.
Webinar MSM.
Yes, it's a very comprehensive meeting, and you're going to learn a lot in that meeting. We're going to spend a lot of time doing a deep dive into your marketing, where you're at, where you can go, and then understanding your goals. What are your goals? Are you looking to completely kick insurance to the curb? Are you looking to do it by focusing on a certain aspect, maybe growing the implant cases, the Invisalign cases? There's so many ways we can get you there, but we'll find it out. We'll create the plan, and we will set you up to successfully get the insurance out of your practice and out of your pocketbook. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do is I'll just go through each of your slides. I prefer to have my panelists introduce themselves. You know yourselves better than I do. I can read a slide, or you can talk about yourself in first person or third person if you prefer. I don't care. So let's go ahead. And Biren, you're up.
I drew the first straw, huh? Well, my name's Perrin Desports. I'm the founder of a coaching business called The Next Level Executive, where I focus all of my efforts in the emerging group practice space. The last 8 years of my life have been spent in 2 startups, Tusk Partners and Polaris Healthcare Partners, that were strategic consulting and M&A advisory firms for group dental practices, and created a lot of success and saw a lot of challenges along the way. So Next Level is my focus of bringing corporate America experience, 15 years of that, along with consulting experience and being a fellow entrepreneur into the emerging group practice space for those who created successful practices and are contemplating possibly building a group of their own.
Okay, Jeff, your turn.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Jeff Grove. I am a still practicing dentist. I live in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. I'm kind of in the second phase of my career. The first 20 years I spent building, kind of doing everything that you can do in just general practice. Built a pretty large group of practices back in Pennsylvania, where I'm from. Ended up selling that group, moved out to Colorado, was able to sort of reflect on everything that I've learned, all the things that I did well, all the things that I did horribly wrong, and realized that I wanted to kind of have the next 20 years of my career still working in patients' mouths and still working on patients, but also coaching and helping and consulting the next generation of dentists. There's just been so much change in the world of dentistry in the last 5 to 10 years. And I'm really interested in kind of armoring up the next generation and current dentists that kind of want to stay strong, stay at it, stay thriving. So I formed Ascension Dental Coaching, and I am just loving working with dentists and helping them thrive and succeed by sharing with them, like I said, some things that I figured out and did okay with, and then some things that I wish someone would have told me to do completely differently before I, did them and had to learn the hard way. So yeah, really, thanks for having me. I'm just honored to be a part of this panel, and I know some of these guys. Hi, Perrin.
Hey,
crossed paths with many of you, and look forward to interacting and getting to know you all better in the future.
Okay, Matt, your turn.
Hi, Matt Hamblin. I'm with DDS Match. Been in dentistry for 28 years, started in 1997. A lot of background with one of the prominent dealers in startups, and was able to attend a lot of CE and clinical dentistry and practice management, and then saw a need, thought that joining DDS Match, what they did a little bit different in the practice transition world, was really appealing, and kind of drew me away from a pretty comfortable job with that dealer, and have been doing that for a few years now. So it's a pretty exciting, changing market. A lot going on with practice acquisitions, a lot of influence with groups, and certainly evolving, and a lot of unknowns for practice owners. So I really enjoy helping to educate them and guide them through the process.
And Art, your turn.
Thank you.
You need a lot of introduction.
There you go, Lila. Thank you very much. It is an honor to be on this panel with these incredible professionals. My name is Art Wiederman. I've been a dental CPA for 41 years. I ran my own practice for 33 years, and then merged it with a local firm that merged with Eide Bailly, which is 15th or 16th largest firm in the country. I work out of Southern California. I've primarily been, I'm a tax guy, but I help doctors understanding the numbers of their dental practices, working with them on metrics. I am an absolute fan of Gary Takis and Naren and all the things that they're doing to help dentists change their relationships with insurance. In fact, Gary is the one that got me into podcasting about 8 years ago, and I'm very thankful to call him a dear friend and a colleague. And again, I'm the numbers guy, and it's great to talk to all of you, to be on this panel with all of you.
Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we will jump into our Q&A. My preferred method, and if you are all okay with this, is I throw out a question to one of you in particular, and then I love it when the panel jumps in and adds additional information. You all see it from different angles. You all have different strengths when it comes to business of dentistry. So if you have something you want to elaborate on, by all means. All right, so Perrin, you're up first. Based on your experience, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make in going from one location to several locations?
How much time do we have?
Can you keep it under an hour?
Like, can I borrow a whiteboard or something possibly? All right, we'll narrow
Let's make it the top three things.
Yeah,
how's that sound?
I'm kidding. Just because it's a dental practice doesn't mean you should buy it. That's the first thing. All right. And so what I would say is that, in my experience, people buy a second location or buy their first additional location because they've created success in their initial location, right? I mean, it's stable operationally. They can do pretty advanced dentistry. It generates a lot of free cash flow, and they get bored. And bored people make bad business decisions, typically speaking. So when we go off and buy our first additional location, the first thing we want to do is make sure we define what type of practice we're looking for. If you run a high-end fee-for-service with a little bit of insurance in the payer mix, and this is a predominantly insurance with a little bit of Medicaid in it, that's a completely different business than what you're operating. So just because it's for sale doesn't mean that you should buy it. The second thing is, if you are going to add additional locations, the likelihood is you're going to take an income hit to do it. The question is how much of an income hit and for how long. And so when people, contemplate adding additional locations, my first question is, what are your cash reserves and how much cash on balance sheet can you draw upon when there's a trough? Because we need to be prepared for that ahead of time. If you're not prepared for that ahead of time, the bank will get paid, you might not, and therefore you're going to be in conflict with your family or your business partners, and neither of those are good outcomes. The last thing I'll say is, if you are going to buy another practice, these businesses operate on razor thin operating income margins. And when we start thinking about operating income, the cost of debt service, and then the impact on free cash flow, you've got to think about and have a high degree of confidence around some area of expense management and cost improvement in the business, as well as revenue generation. Ideally, a combination of both. So if you buy a business and you have no idea how you're going to improve it, and you have no idea how you're going to generate additional revenues off the top end of it, you shouldn't do it.
Anybody else have anything to add?
This is the dive-in point, guys. Like, don't fight for the leftover scraps. Come on, Wiederman's got some ideas on this. Jeff, you ought to.
You're calling me out. I'll talk. So, Perrin, you're spot on this. And what I tell my clients who want to open a second or a third location is, number one, have you maximized the opportunity for the first location? And I'm sure, Jeff, that you can probably look in a practice and see someone who's doing 1.2 and say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? How's your case presentation? Do you do some specialty work? And you could probably take a location doing 1.2 and take it to 2 million. And then that marginal profit is usually well above 50%. And then you don't have to deal with all the aggravation of finding a location, going into debt, finding associates. I mean, so I'm not a huge fan, unless you're really entrepreneurial, of doing this, because a lot of times the math doesn't work. The family time goes down because it's not a 40-hour-a-week job. So that's kind of my thoughts about it.
Totally agree with Perrin and Art. Thank you, guys. Another thing I'll add to that is, I love, Perrin, how you said a lot of bad decisions get made in this situation because like a dentist or a leader who may be entrepreneurial, like Art's saying, becomes bored and thinks, more is going to be better. But a lot of thought has to be put into making that next move for that next practice. They're very likely, per Art, I agree 100%, is more that could be done with that current practice that you have. That would be let's just say, a safer way of satisfying that bored instinct than going out and getting another practice. Another thing that I learned, and I love to talk about things that I learned the hard way, kind of like the ask me how I know principle, is it's very difficult to scale great culture and great leadership. And if you're bored in your practice, it's probably because you have a rock star team that's taking a lot of stuff off of your plate. You're doing the dentistry that you want to do. You're great at attracting and retaining new talent when team members cycle through. You've got a great patient base with solid Google reviews. Per Naren, Naren reminded us in his presentation that you've got great systems and processes in place, and you think, more is better. Let's double this. But it can be very, very hard to scale some of those things. It's very hard to scale culture, and it's very hard to scale leadership, and to take the special sauce that you've got on your hamburger and just plop it on another hamburger and expect that one to taste as good. It doesn't always work the way that you envision it. So I think the things you guys said are spot on.
Yeah, I mean, I had this conversation last week with someone who was considering acquiring a second practice, and I mean, all of these things came up. They're part of that conversation. You really, I mean, I try to walk people through it and be deliberate. A lot of times, it's driven because they've done really well in their existing practice, and so hey. You know, I'm going to build the next group and make millions and ride off into the sunset. And the thing that I think often they take for granted is when everything going on in your business is 20 steps away, it's much easier to manage than when it's even 5 miles away. It's still in another building. You can't run over and handle it if something pops up. You're not interacting with patients. And I think maybe that's the largest thing that people take for granted is if you're a really good leader and engaged with your team, that you're now managing remotely, and that's a whole different ballgame.
Okay, so next question goes to Jeff. He was talking about the importance about leadership. So it's important to be a good leader. Talk about the impact a good leader has versus a bad leader.
Well, as I mentioned, you know, I think Naren did a great job reminding us that the success of a dental practice, and let's say its ability to weather storms and challenges, depends on the processes and systems that are in place. And if you've got strong processes and systems, you can have someone that leaves, goes out on maternity leave, gets sick and moves on, whatever the reason, team members turn over, whatever the reason is, you have these processes and systems in place. Right alongside processes and systems, to me, the practice success level will rise and fall on the strength of the leader and let's just say the intentionality of the doctor almost all the time who's in charge. I just, when I meet with clients and discuss that, I just can't emphasize that leadership is a choice. And I see so many practices that I work with where the doctor, the leader, has almost become hostage and powerless in the face of their team and their team's needs and the way their team drives the practice. And it drastically limits the doctor's ability to change, to pivot, to be agile, to change their focus, to hone in on things that might be better for the practice, because the team has kind of taken over the culture and taken over kind of driving those processes and systems. Leadership is also just, I think, so important because it's, you know, it's, if there isn't that one person who's showing up with that core energy each and every day, I always think of like a dental practice or really any small business as like a slowly leaking tire that's always deflating a little bit unless it's being pumped up and refilled. And the practices that are kind of constantly deflating get stagnant. They have a harder time weathering change and challenge, and we've had more change and challenge and tipping points in the last 5 to 10 years than I think we've ever had with dentistry. And so I still think there needs to be a real focus on leadership and the development of that one person that runs that practice and sets the course, sets the tone, sets the energy level, sets the pace. That is really, really hard to replicate and scale, you know, per our last question. But when you've got it in one practice, it really makes an enormous difference.
Yeah, I might build upon Jeff's answer, and all of that is 100% correct. There are a couple of other things to keep in mind. You know, when we start out buying or building our first dental practice, the dentist himself or herself reaches the top of the food chain instantaneously. They are the owner of the business, the personal guarantor on the debt. They're the largest clinical producer. They own the business. They're the straw that stirs the drink. And there's nobody above them. And when we start talking about leadership, leadership is a really easy topic to discuss. It's really hard to implement and execute upon. And when you have no one to model yourself against or emulate their leadership behavior and traits, it's a very lonely position. And I think you owe it to yourself, if you're going to be the owner and leader of a practice, you owe it to yourself to find a cohort of people in your industry and outside of your industry that help you raise your own game and help you to see your own blind spots. None of us have gotten to where we are doing this alone. And those of us who've worked under mentors and other leaders in a professional development capacity got more out of us at an earlier stage than we could ever have gotten out of ourselves in isolation. So surround yourself with the people who are going to develop you. Leadership is the second thing I'll say is leadership fundamentally is all about creating results through others that is greater than what you could do on your own in the same amount of time. If you are a solo practice and you are probably the largest clinical producer, you can outwork your problems. If you're not a good leader, you can do more dentistry. If you want to take 2 weeks off and go to Bora Bora or whatever, you can work a couple of extra Fridays and make up for it. When you start adding additional locations and you have to create results through other associates and other operational people and you can't be there all the time, that's a totally different challenge. And what you find is that your communication skills will make or break your effectiveness as a leader, period, full stop. So the dentist who thinks I'm a good clinician, they know what they're supposed to be doing, kind of to Jeff's point, the business runs on its own, is a ticking time bomb because you end up with disengaged people in remote locations who aren't doing it your way. If you can communicate effectively, you build trust in your team and they will follow you and anoint you as a leader because they will follow you during times of uncertainty, like Jeff mentioned, which is what we're living through right now.
I have learned, I led a team for 33 years. I didn't have any formal leadership training as an accountant or in school. Leadership, while it's complex and there have been hundreds of books written on it, is, in my opinion, it's not rocket science. What it is having a plan, going to your team and saying, guys, this is what I want to do. And I love asking for their help. People who work in dental offices, accounting offices, manufacturing businesses, and are not owners, take a job because they don't want to be owners. They want to have a job, they want to get a paycheck, and they want to work 8 hours a day. So you as the leader have to say, hey guys, here's our plan. We're going to add a marketing component to our practice. We're going to hire Equa to do our marketing for us. And here is where I need your help. And you delegate down to your team the components of the plan that you want to have done. I love asking employees for their help, but getting up once a year, I used to every January, we would have a 2-hour meeting. I would put a PowerPoint together and I'd say, here's what we're going to do this year. Here's our goals. And, but engage your team. And I will tell you, doctors, I want to agree with what everybody said here. If you are thinking that your team is just going to manage this office and take you to the promised land, the word ticking time bomb, Perrin, I think is a really good analogy.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to say before I throw a question at Matt? Okay. How are dental practices valued?
So generally, it's all cash flow and profitability, right? I mean, that's ultimately how any business is valued. And the challenge that some people have when they look at it is if a group or a DSO, or if you're evaluating it as a second location, you've got to take into account doctor compensation. And they throw out a word EBITDA that people sometimes understand or don't understand, but it's essentially profitability and what's the profit margin in that practice, what's the overhead, and you've got to pay a doctor to do that production. And so when you start looking at second locations or you start looking at acquisitions that are done by groups, there's got to be profitability and the ability to pay someone to be a producer. From a private and owner operator standpoint, it's cash flow, and that owner's compensation can also be part of the clinical provider role that they would have in the practice. But ultimately, it comes down to what kind of revenue and cash flow is going through the practice. And I know that's a kind of a cold, hard numbers, P&L kind of thing. And so I'm making the assumption that as a clinical provider, you're doing what's best for your patients. You're only diagnosing what needs to be done. You're only treating what needs to be done, that the patient's making choices in treatment and all those things. I don't want to say that that it's all about just doing as much dentistry as you can and not remembering that we're in healthcare. I'm not suggesting that at all. but I know sometimes people want to have their practice valued based on potential. Maybe they've got 8 operatories and they only use 3 or 4 of them. And certainly that ability or that growth opportunity that hasn't been taken advantage of may make that practice more appealing. But people, if they pay a little bit if they're going to pay for potential, they only pay a little bit for potential. So, equipment, the quality and the longevity and the state of the equipment, the technology, is it up to date? A lot of those things that I think sometimes doctors get caught up on is important. A 40-year-old equipment is certainly going to be looked at differently than maybe 10 or 15-year-old equipment. But, maybe 5-year-old equipment and 10-year-old equipment are looked at similarly because there's still useful life in those. But essentially anything in the practice, if you've got technology, if you've got nice equipment, if you've got great curb appeal, if you're efficient, it's all going to show up in the P&L and in the tax returns, and it's going to be profitability that someone can follow. And no matter who the buyer is, that's what they're looking at.
Question. If you have 40-year-old equipment in your practice, is it worth it to upgrade to equipment now just to sell?
Boy, it makes me think of that Confucius statement. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And maybe that doesn't apply here. It's, if you're really looking to sell today, you're not going to get 100% return on that equipment. If you've got equipment that's in disrepair or isn't functioning, the practice isn't going to be valuable if it's not functioning. So we're kind of talking about 2 extremes. I think I don't know that I would advise without seeing it. I mean, this is what I would say if you're asking that question is invite someone like me to come into the office and kind of see what's going on. Can you do some minor things to help that equipment be functional and look nice and operate for a buyer without making the significant investment that brand new equipment would be? Or maybe you can track down some equipment that's maybe not brand new but still in good shape and has a useful life in it. But you're not going to get, if you went out and replaced all your equipment and spent $100,000, it's not going to increase the value of the practice by that amount. It'll just make the practice more appealing.
Okay, sorry, throw that one at you, but I play devil's advocate all the time, and it just flew out of my mouth. So there. All right, now let's open it up to the team.
Question that comes up, and unfortunately, I see too many doctors that they started a practice, equipped it 40 years ago, and now they want to sell it. And if things have really aged poorly, that can be tough.
Yeah, I mean, look, Matt's right, but let's take it from the acquirer standpoint for a second, okay? And if it's a senior dentist who's selling on his or her way out of the profession, the likelihood is that they have not made any capital reinvestments in the business for quite some time for preservation of personal income and cash flow, completely understandably. It never ceases to amaze me, and Matt, maybe this goes back to our time with one of those large industry distribution companies that you referenced in your introduction. But I would say that, if you're going to acquire a practice, you owe it to yourself to find an independent service technician or one as part of a distribution company to do an operational assessment of everything in that practice. It never fails to amaze me when somebody says, I just acquired whatever type of a general dentistry practice, and 3 months in, I didn't realize the digital pan had 100,000 shots already taken on it, and it was destined to fail within a couple of months of me buying it. Now I got to sink another $100,000 into the business. That's completely avoidable. So if you're not doing any type of due diligence clinically, operationally, or financially, then what are you buying? Nobody buys a practice to simply maintain it. They buy it to improve it, and that includes operational considerations every bit as much.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean there isn't value to that practice. What likely has to be taken into account, and this may be more up Art's wheelhouse, is you've got to take into account a capital equipment investment, or CapEx, right? Like if this equipment's aged and it's going to have to start to be replaced, then you need to build into that cash flow some investment to replace that equipment and get it up to date. And you can include that in the cash flow, and you could use that as part of the valuation and make an adjustment for that. It doesn't have to be all or nothing or black and white. If there's a great patient base and a loyal patient base and great employees and a lot of goodwill in that practice, sometimes some updates like that can be a real shot in the arm to increasing patient flow and growing the practice.
So for doctors that want to increase the valuation that they get on the practice, Matt is absolutely right. Practices are not valued based on potential. I can't tell you how many doctors have called me up and say, well, wait a minute, my practice has got, we don't do endo, we don't place implant. I go, that's wonderful, but it's not going to help you in your valuation. A lot of doctors, as they're getting older into their 60s and 70s, they kind of slow down. They don't want to be working as hard, and they have declining revenues. And buyers don't like declining revenues. And Matt, I would hope you'd agree with me. They don't like declining revenues. The other thing, and I do this in some lectures that I do when I talk to sellers, doctors, and I hope there are no IRS agents on this call, but if you have been running the kitchen sink and the fixtures through your practice for 30 years, you have won the war. You might consider losing battles for about 2 or 3 years because your profit's going to look terrible and the banks are not going to give you the valuation. I mean, Matt and I can take over this and do this for hours and talk about this. So we want to see you having growing revenues over the past 2 or 3 years. We want to see strong profitability in your practice. I absolutely agree. Unless your equipment is just falling apart, putting an investment in other than digital x-ray, because the young dentists going to school today, they don't know how to practice without that technology. So it's going to be challenging. They're going to take 25 to 75 grand maybe off the price if you don't have that technology. But as Matt very aptly says, and by the way, folks, DDS Match is one of the best in the country. I know a lot of folks at DDS Match, and they're just a great company in helping to sell and transition practices. But you want to have a good growing revenue and profit base, and it makes it a lot easier for Matt to get you the best price.
Yeah, we could talk about this for a long time. It's another one I was talking about leadership, where I think we've shared some great nuggets, but I'm sure there's other topics, but all things to consider. I mean, really, as you get closer, you want to start having conversations. I think if someone's starting to consider it and they think they're 5 or 10 years out, it's not too early to start having conversations about that and preparing the practice. There's a lot of really good consultants and advisors out there that tell people really when you start a business, you should start preparing it to sell. And that's when you're really going to maximize that value and take advantage of the business as best you can. And then the transition when you're ready not to be an owner.
Okay, so next question goes to Art. What has been the experience when your dental clients start dropping insurance plans?
Okay, I love this question.
So do I.
So in every case, without exception, my doctors become more profitable. They become happier in their practice. They seem to see fewer patients on a daily basis. They get to spend more time with their patients. I'm going to give you an example of one of them. I have a doctor and I'm located in Orange County, California. So we have a doctor in a very nice area of Orange County. And he had one major insurance, which is the big insurance that everybody seems to have. They have they have 38 different components, and they dropped that insurance, and they went out of network, and they did it very intentionally. It took them about 6 months to a year to do it. Jeff will tell you, you don't go out of network by just sending a letter to your patients on Monday morning saying we're out of network. You don't do that. That's a whole nother seminar. So this doctor did that. And what they found is they initially lost some patients, But they have told me that not only did virtually all of those patients return to the practice because of the experiences they were getting in other practices, but those patients started talking to their friends that were in network with that insurance, and they were actually getting more patients, new patients, who had that insurance and who understood the quality of care in that practice, and they became patients at a fee-for-service level. So, I mean, I had another doctor who was, a pediatric dentist in their area. The reimbursement was like 30 to 40%. And this doctor called me up and said, Art, I'm having to put $15,000 a month into this practice. What do I do? I said, you have two choices. Either clean out your bank account and declare bankruptcy or go out of network. There's no middle ground here. They did that and they ended up making $1 million more in profit by doing that. So I don't ever, I've never seen anybody regret going out of network with a dental plan. But again, as Jeff and Perrin and well, as our panel will tell you, it has to be done deliberately. It has to be done with a plan, and it's really important.
Yeah, I second that. It's all about strategy and doing it properly. And I being in and out of a lot of offices, I saw it was interesting because I think sometimes it was a little mind blowing to the dentist that their schedule was maybe a little lighter. It was a little easier to keep on time. They liked the pace. And that felt odd because they were used to working a lot more or a lot more hurried, but the bank account had more money in it. And at times when they first did it, they had a hard time computing those two things. Wait a second, I feel like I'm doing less, but I actually have more in the bank. How is this actually working?
100% agree with you guys. I'm so glad you asked this question and brought it up because we're entering this period of dentistry again where there's this confluence of challenges that have kind of created this tipping point of stress and higher rates of burnout than we've ever seen in the profession before. And it's a topic I'm really interested in. And I like to talk to dentists about why are dentists burning out? Why are they feeling like they can't run their practices? Why are they suffering in their personal lives and taking stress, home with them and not being able to like figure out and armor up against the challenges that we're seeing in the dental practice? And when I talk with dentists about burnout and you peel back the layers, many, many times it lands with this PPO speed-driven kind of hamster wheel. I use that term that we're on working for the insurance companies. And when dentists decide to come up with a comprehensive plan, like Art said, it doesn't happen overnight. A comprehensive plan, a comprehensive focus for their practice. They decide, here's what we're really good at, and we're going to do more of this. Here's what we're not that great at. We're going to do less of this. And they start to peel back and peel away from being that hamster wheel dentist for PPO production. Lots of opportunities open up for them to have more peace, to do quality work, to attract and retain less stressed out, higher quality employees. It's amazing. It's almost like the light starts to shine back on the practice again. And it is a slow process, but I agree with Art completely. I've never worked with a dentist that's gone through that and regretted it. It creates so much opportunity and so much positive change. Now, there are dentists that love to grind and crank and go fast and do lots of dentistry. They know who they are. They know they maybe they have and I admire dentists that accept some of the plans like Medicaid and Medicare. We need dentists to take care of that group of patients. My hat's off to them. Those dentists know who they are. They run their practices efficiently and lean. Their teammates know what they're all about. Again, they have that core focus. It's the practices that try to do like a mix of both. They're accepting PPOs, and on one hand, they're on the hamster and trying to grind out, and they're trying to figure out why I can't get a certain amount of production in a day to sustain the economic viability of the practice. But then on the other hand, they're trying to attract fee-for-service patients and do maybe some more bigger cases, and they're trying to like bring in Invisalign and implants, and it's sort of like that lack of focus that I see causes a tremendous amount of stress too. I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but those two, like coming up with a philosophy and a focus for your practice, really relates to that and relates to that decision to move away from PPOs and more toward fee-for-service.
I'll add two things just really fast. Philosophically, the make it up on volume approach rarely works unless, to Jeff's point, you've built your business around that, and most have not. So be careful if that's your strategy, make it up on volume. The second thing is revenue mix or payer mix ought to be at least an annual focus of every business owner. And specifically, if you're gradually gonna walk through this process, you start with the low end plans, and just because you might have 10% of your patient population tied to one particular insurance carrier doesn't mean that 10% of your revenue came from it. The likelihood is that it's a lot lower than the patient count. So if yours is a business that's already at or close to max capacity and you're looking for a way to accommodate new full fee paying patients, that's the place to start.
Okay, perfect. And something you saying earlier about eliminate the things you don't like and do the things that you do like. That's one thing. So I'm talking to a doctor that says, I'm looking to get out of insurance, but I know I need to replace that patient flow, which is a key part of it. All right, what are the things that we're going to be optimizing your site for? What do you want those patients calling you for? So it's always a key part to figure out what aspects of your practice you're really going to drill down on. All right, so Karen, you're up. Everyone seems to struggle when it comes to recruiting and retaining associates. So what insights can you share with the audience today in this area?
Yeah, we could probably do another full day panel on this one with a whiteboard too. Look, if yours is a growing business, regardless of how many locations it has, you are in the recruiting business, whether you realize it or not, and whether you embrace that or not. And something that I learned early on in the Patterson days, being a general manager there, was that you never take your foot off the gas when it comes to recruiting. So if yours is a growing business, you're going to be adding net new associates for productive capacity as the business continues to grow, or certainly backfilling behind any type of turnover voluntarily or involuntarily. So whenever you have to terminate an associate, or you get, they're supposed to give me a 90-day notice and they gave me 2 weeks, right? How many times do we hear that? Well, that's going to happen. So always have a list of viable candidates to choose from, even if those candidates are employed somewhere else. When you default to working with a recruiter, the associates that the recruiter is connected to are people looking for a job. They may be looking for a job for a reason. Your best candidate may be employed somewhere else, but it doesn't mean they're happy, and it doesn't mean that's where they're going to finish their career. So always be connecting with people who are gainfully employed right now, but you never know about what might happen in the future. The second thing is, when you go about recruiting tactically now, do not play the dueling comp rate game. And I hear this far too often, which is that, well, I failed to land that associate because I only pay 30% of collections and the doctor down the road is paying 35%. And that's the only question that the associate typically knows to ask. What's your comp rate? What's the difference in 35 and 30? The answer is you don't know. It's based on volume. You can't spend a comp rate. So if you pay 30% of collections or 35 or 25 or whatever your rate is, state it from a standpoint of what you expect that associate's first year, second year, and third year collection volume to be, and translate it into income for them. If you can haul the mail, Dr. So-and-so, I would expect you to earn A, B, and C in our practice. Furthermore, here are the productions of the last 3 associates I've hired in year 1, year 2, and year 3 on a track record of performance. I've got the business engine to support you. My question for you is, can you haul the mail? It's not on me, it's on you. The third piece is, if you're going to play the long game, you have to have a doctor development plan. And if you do have a doctor development plan that is laid out in some curriculum, for lack of a better term, that may involve them investing and you investing, or mentorship or time frames or what are expected outcomes, whatever it may be, lead with that. Don't put that in the back and wait to bring it up at the closing table, so to speak. That should be your differentiator, because no young associate wants to think of themselves as at the end of their clinical career. They want to get better and be a master at their craft. If you can help them unlock that, the likelihood is that you could land somebody from the long haul, and the key is retention at that point.
Okay, anybody have anything they want to jump on and add to this?
I was just going to say, Perrin's third point there, the doctor development. You can't state that, how important that is with attracting and especially retaining high quality associates. Working with the fourth year dental students here in Colorado, I am constantly reminded how new and green and still learning they are when they get out of dental school, and how fearful they are to take on procedures. And so many dentists hiring dentists will throw out, the anecdotal, oh, I'll be there for you. I'll be in your corner. I'll help you with it, whatever you need. I'll be right there for you to mentor you. But very few have that true, as Perrin referred to, doctor development plan that they could put in front of a young associate and say, here are the steps and processes we go through to ensure that you're going to get the mentorship and the development that you need. That's what creates loyalty. That's what creates the time that an associate spends in a practice to develop the relationship that leads to great things and leads to longevity and an associate sticking around for a long time. Maybe it leads to some type of ownership stake in the practice, but it's that early development plan that really is the hook. I'm always encouraging doctors young in their career to focus on what they learn early on versus what they earn. It's sort of like, yes, you're going to make money, you're going to earn money, you're going to be able to pay your bills, you'll be able to pay your dental school. We got all that. But you have to focus on what you're learning early. And just one story about that. There was an associate I was talking with recently who's really, really happy where she is. She's thriving, she's doing well. And she said, one of the things that distinguished the practice she was working in was this doctor development plan. I said, tell me about that. She said, I went into the practice, Jeff, and for the first month, the superstar busy owner doctor required that associate to assist them. She was 2 years out of school, assist them and watch how he does every single procedure in that practice. Learn, ask questions, develop. That's a tremendous amount of energy and time that dentist in that month put into that associate. I thought that was just a great example of putting your money where your mouth is, walking the walk instead of just talking the talk, about really starting to develop and form a relationship with that associate. And she is thriving now because of that month that she spent assisting and watching that doctor do everything that he does.
Well, one of the things I've seen several of my clients do is to actually put together, not only to compound on what Jeff was saying about the owner doctor putting in the time to train, but these doctors actually put together an educational program. Because remember, if you have an associate, that associate has probably been working a minimum 10, 15, 20 years. They built the practice to the point that they need an associate. They've gone to lots of continuing education courses. They know what their practice is about. For example, if we have a practice that is heavy in Invisalign, that doctor probably did some Invisalign education, and that doctor can say, hey, I'm going to make an investment in you, and I'm going to have you take in the first year course A, B, C, D, and E. They may send them to Coyce or Spear or Pankey or wherever you're going to send them, on top of doing the training that Jeff is talking about. And then you have an associate who's saying, wow, this practice is going to invest in me. They want me to grow. They want me to be successful. I'm coming here.
Yeah, at DDS Match, so we do some associate placements, and I talk to young dentists who are looking for their next opportunity. Some are looking to buy, and some are looking for a new place because where they're at, they're not happy. And I don't think I've ever had an associate say, "Hey, I'm leaving because I'm only getting 30% of collections instead of 35." What is most common, or what I hear that they desire most, they want a full schedule. They want to show up and know that there's patients on the schedule and that they've got dentistry to do. And then the mentoring that all of you have talked about. They want to be able to develop, and it's an interesting balance of they want independence to practice what they've been learning, but know that someone is there to guide them and will point them in the direction, and that if they choose to start doing some procedures, some clinical care that they've learned recently or developed, that they'll have the ability to jump into that and start to do some of those advanced procedures or more complex procedures. And they really love the idea that they can be mentored and guided and have someone who's 100 steps ahead of them and point them in the right direction of which courses to take, maybe go to courses with them and also teach them what they know. So I'm just reinforcing, I think, what everybody has said. I would say the two biggest things that I hear are a full schedule and the ability to do dentistry, and then that mentoring and ability to continue to learn and add, maybe they've placed a few implants, but they want to be able to place a lot more. Maybe they want to do more complex surgeries. Some want to do more endo, some don't want to do endo. I mean, every dentist is different in the things they like to do, what's in their wheelhouse. And if they want to jump into something, they want to know that they're going to be supported, mentored, and encouraged to advance their career and their clinical abilities.
Okay, wonderful. Okay,
Well
Jeff,
said, Matt.
your turn. Why is it important for dentists to have a core focus and core values for the business?
I think we hit on the core focus a question or two ago. With core values for a while were like this. They were this big buzzword. You have to have core values, develop them for your business, put them on the wall. Everybody needs to look at them every day, and like Notre Dame, slap them when they come in and be a champion today. Here's where I see core values still really playing an important role in dental practices. And Art mentioned this earlier. He said, when you involve your team, when they help build something, they're going to believe in it more. So where I see core values and core focus and words and themes like that come up with my coaching clients, and I see it come up in a successful way, it's in the recruiting, hiring, attracting of great team members. Like Perrin said, 100% agree. You always have to be in recruiting mode. You always have to be looking for new talent. You never know when someone's going to go out on maternity leave or change jobs, or their spouse is going to change jobs. They need to move halfway across the country. You have to have systems in place and processes in place to constantly be attracting and retaining the best talent. So what I love about the core value process, I love working with teams. Pick core team members, get them together and talk about what are the most important values that we have as a practice. What are our non-negotiables? What make us tick? What's our MO? What makes us special? And if we're going to bring a new team member in, and our philosophy is we're always looking for great new team members for growth or for attrition or whatever. And when we bring a new team member in, what do we want that team member to look like? And that's where the core value discussions come with the team members. And the team, to Art's point, they get involved in that and they believe in it. And they're literally describing the person that they want to work with shoulder to shoulder. They're describing the next person that they want to bring in. Because if you have a team of A players, and I really hope and pray that every dentist on this webinar has a team of A players or gets to that point. If you bring a C player onto that because you're just trying to plug a spot and you think you're going to be the dentist hiring hero, and we lost an assistant, so we got to get one in there really quick. If you bring a C player into that A team, the entire level of that A team drops. Maybe they drop to a B, maybe a B minus, who knows? But what core values to me are most important in the modern dental practice when you involve your team in describing how you operate, how you roll, and what are the characteristics of the people that you have and the people that you want to get. That then becomes a list and becomes a core part of your attracting, retaining, and hiring of people.
Okay, anybody else going to jump on, or do I throw one for Matt?
I think Jeff nailed that one, honestly. I mean, kudos. Grand slam.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Barry.
Yeah.
Okay, then, Matt, what are the most valuable dental practices doing that others are not?
So if a practice is valued based on cash flow and profitability, then it comes down to being deliberate and managing that, right? Many of them are doing more profitable procedures, so expanded. They're placing implants, they're doing complex cases, they're doing surgery. They often run really efficiently. So, and the reason why I explain that is sometimes people have this revenue goal of I want to be a $3 million practice or whatever it might be. And if you're a $3 million practice, but you run at 75% overhead, that's not very profitable. You could be half of that. Maybe you're a $1.5 million practice and you run at 50% overhead. That profitability is going to make the practice a lot more desirable and improve the value of that practice. So that's what I'd say is it's really about, the most valuable practices tend to have a lower overhead. They tend to get closer to that 55% overhead. And that drives up their valuations and their desirability. Those are the practices that other people want to be a part of. Even as an associate who joins that practice, they know that there's profitability in there to pay them a really good wage for the dentistry that they're doing. So really it's strategies around that. I think Perrin said, be deliberate about your payer mix and your insurance and breaking free of that. If you can increase your payment by $100 on a procedure, generally that's 100% profit to the practice. You're not working any harder, you're not doing any more procedures, and that's going to improve that profitability and increase the value of that dental practice.
Yeah, I might add just a couple of things to Matt's perspective, which is gold. But there are a few other things, especially in the group practice or emerging group practice space, and in no particular order of importance. I would say, for one, if you're going to buy another business or buy your first practice, all acquisitions are a combination of cash flow and risk at the end of the day. So we want to make sure that cash flows out of the business are as stable as they can possibly be, and that the risk of us as new owners is mitigated to the best of our ability. So when we look at a practice to buy, the first thing you should look at beyond top line revenue and beyond bottom line profitability is capacity. If it's a general dentistry practice and it's got 5 or fewer operatories, that means you can only have one doctor operating in there at a time. And that means you have something called provider risk. If that provider has a health scare, you have to terminate them, they quit, whatever it may be, it's probably going to be a dark revenue day. So we would rather buy practices that are 6 or more operatories with the potential, at least, to accommodate multiple dentists simultaneously. The second thing would be that in group practices, we talk about EBITDA or normalized operational cash flow, normalized after doctor compensation. In a general dentistry world, that's somewhere between about 18 and 25% operational profit. And then we look at revenue from a standpoint of being able to take advantage of the capacity, and we measure that in terms of something called utilization rate, which is dollars generated in revenue per chair per hour that the business is open. And in a general dentistry context annually, that's somewhere between about $125 to $175 per chair per hour. If the practice you're looking at has 6 or more operatories, is generating $150 per chair per hour that it's open, it's doing solid dentistry right down the middle, bread and butter, and it has a nice top line revenue construct to it. And then if it's holding up to Matt's point in terms of overhead and generating 18 to 25% in terms of an EBITDA margin, that's probably a pretty good business.
That's a great point on the buyer's ability to realistically repeat the revenue that's coming in is real. A savvy buyer is going to want to look at the clinical mix if they're becoming a provider. What's their ability to retain a provider if that's what it is? That's all critical. And I've seen practices that maybe they're extremely profitable, but they're doing some really unique things. Those can be really desirable, but the number of people who could come in and repeat that becomes challenging. And so they're only more desirable to people who can meet that need or repeat that. And I know, when groups or someone else is looking at acquiring those practices, sometimes they shy away. because they know they'll have a hard time replacing the provider, where maybe a private buyer actually values that practice a little more because they know they can come in and repeat the revenue, repeat the treatment, provide the care that's going on in the practice. So there's a whole lot of things to look at. I appreciate parents' point of view and perspective from that scaling side of adding additional practices and the risk of a one provider practice if that provider disappears.
Well,
Which is back to that retaining associates, right? I mean, we're going full circle.
All right, let's take one more question, and it's Art, and then we will be getting close to the hour and time to wrap things up. Okay, Art. In most businesses, when costs go up, businesses raise their prices. What happens if a dentist has the majority of revenue in patients who are in network with an insurance plan?
Okay, that's what's called a loaded question, Lila. You know that, but here's
I know the answers here, but
you know the answer, and I know the answer. Okay, so when you go to the grocery store and or you go to buy a car, and not getting into politics here, we have tariffs on the table since the beginning of the year. Businesses have to raise their prices because they have to cover their costs, because they have to make a profit, because that's why businesses are in business. In the dental profession, if you have a model where 80% of your revenues are fixed because you're in a contract with an insurance company to only charge X for a crown or X for a composite restoration, there's nothing in there that says your costs can't go up. So what happened during the pandemic is when we came out of the pandemic, the cost of labor in dental offices went sky high. We had people leaving. 12% of the hygienists left the profession. We had assistants leaving the profession. So it's supply and demand. The wages that these employees demanded went up, in some cases 20, 30, 40%. And the doctors had no ability to raise their fees because they were in network. And in fact, insurance companies were coming in and saying, oh, well, we understand that all of your costs are going up, but we're going to reduce your reimbursements because we can. So, because an insurance company has two objectives: collect as much in premiums as they possibly can and pay out as little in benefits as they possibly can. That is why they are on this planet. Gary does a great slide. I've lectured with Gary 15, 20 times in my career, where he shows what the CEOs of insurance companies earn. And it's kind of open. You know that slide, right, Lila? So, but back to your question, it's a fact of there is nowhere to go profitability wise but down in that situation if you are heavily contracted with insurance companies. It's my life is a math problem. That's what my tagline is in my lectures and everything that I do and on the podcast that I do. My life's a math problem, and the math problem says if I can't raise my prices, but my costs go up, my bottom line profit goes down. And for Matt, when you come to Matt to sell your practice, Matt's going to say, oh, your profit is down. It is worth less. That's what he's going to tell you.
okay, anybody want to add anything here?
Art had the mic drop moment of the day, obviously. So
Totally agree. Well,
here's the mic, and I'm dropping it right now. There we go.
That's right.
I will kind of add on to that. Now, your prices have gone up. You can't raise because of insurance. What's the next step? You have to get rid of the insurance, but you've got to replace those insurance patients. And that is I'm going to segue into Equa, because that is what we do for our clients, is we help you get those new patients in the door that are looking for your services. Let me just go ahead and share a slide here. All right, so this is the information about Equa. I think Naren shared this in his presentation. You can scan this QR code, and it'll take you right to a link to book a meeting with us. You will be getting this information elsewhere as well, but we will create a plan that's going to help you get out of network with these plans. Once you've come to me and talk to me and say, okay, these are our services that we really want to optimize for. Now we can create that plan. Okay. And ideally, they're your fee for service things. The implants, the veneers, the crown, well, crowns are covered to a little bitty minute degree, but veneers, implants, Invisalign, things of that nature, your fee for service procedures that are going to attract you fee for service patients. And now we've got you positioned. We've got that stream of patients coming in. You're talking to your in-office patients, explaining why you need to kick Delta and everybody else to the curb. And you're set for success to get out of these networks. All right, so that is that part. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. It has been a pleasure. I'm grateful to our panelists. It has been fabulous. You have shared so much information, and I want to thank our audience. It has been fabulous. Thank you so much for sticking with us through the end. You will be getting your CE credits for anybody that stayed from beginning to end. Will be about 2 weeks. There is going to be a form you need to fill out. Fill out that form and you will get your credits. And panelists, anything else you want to add before we call it a night?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it very much. Been great.
Thank you, Lila. Really appreciate it and support everything you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoyed the conversation and appreciate the other panelists' comments. Thank you for the invitation.
Angela, anything you want to add?
Thank you so much for having me. It was really great information. Loved it.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you all back sometime not too distant future.
Thank you.
Cheers.
And thank you, audience. Good night. Or, well, it's not night. Normally these are at night, so good afternoon, everybody.
Have a great weekend.